I'm on 550 westbound just past, I believe, the Buffalo exit, and I think there's a body on the side of the road. To die of a death of that, a gruesome death, was just gut-wrenching to see that. Something that'll stick with me the rest of my life. The violence was so extreme that when the police discovered her, it seemed as though her body had been drained of all its blood. The victim was identified as a 21-year-old university student, Latrice Curtis. When law enforcement first arrived, her body was located just over an embankment, just sort of at the top of an embankment. She had been stabbed so many times. All of the blood had been drained, and she was so pallid and pale that it was very clear that there were gaping holes of her skin that had been sliced open. This was absolutely a targeted murder because of the number of stab wounds that were on her body. It wasn't just I want her dead. I want her beyond dead. But the pressing questions were, who could be desperate enough to commit such a gruesome act in the middle of the highway? And why? Nestled in the southeastern region of the United States, North Carolina is a state rich in diverse landscapes and cultural offerings. Residents revel in the state's diverse geography with sandy beaches along the Atlantic coast and the majestic peaks of the Appalachian Mountains. Despite its overall appeal, North Carolina, unfortunately, contends with a higher crime rate, and today, we delve into one of its most disturbing cases. Latrice Curtis was born as Latrice Marital Jones to Sherman and Cynthia Jones on May 28, 1986 in Raleigh, North Carolina. She shared a loving home with her older brothers Justin and Marlon. She was affectionately known as Treese. During her upbringing, Latrice was a constant companion to her father, to such an extent that her father often referred to her as his little boy in a dress because she engaged in activities typically associated with fathers and sons. Perhaps it was influenced by growing up in a home with older brothers. We did a lot of fishing. I even took her hunting one time. I taught her everything that I knew about basketball. I taught her to dribble. I taught her to shoot. I taught her the layups. She was a daddy's girl all the way. No doubt about it. Remaining the same throughout her time in junior high, things took a turn for Latrice in high school. She was now blossoming into a full-fledged woman and began engaging in all the typical activities of a teenager. I think that she got her nails painted and got her hair done, and that was the end of basketball. Gifted with good looks and an infectious smile, Latrice had no trouble making friends. She was one of the most popular girls in high school. She was loved by everybody around her and lived life to the fullest. Friends described her as someone who always had a smile on her face and knew how to make others laugh. So naturally, admirers flocked to her. But she mostly stayed out of trouble mainly because her dad Sherman was a juvenile corrections officer. He was happy seeing that despite all the attention, Latrice always put her education first. Her hard work paid off when she was accepted into Bennett College in Raleigh, North Carolina, which she attended from February 2004 to February 2005. From there, she transferred to Wake Tech Community College in Greensboro, North Carolina. After spending some time there, Latrice was thrilled to enroll at North Carolina Central University, pursuing a major in accounting. Despite all her successes, Latrice remained humble and supportive. Friends fondly recall that she was always there for them in tough times, offering honest opinions whenever they sought her advice. She was always with a smile on her face, and she was always encouraging to everyone even if we come to her with our problems. During our first semester at NCCU, Latrice crossed paths with Darren Lee Curtis, a fellow accounting student and former National Guard soldier. Darren, who is 5 years her senior, also hailed from Raleigh. Darren was sweet. He was shy, kind of reserved. While dating might not have been Latrice's immediate focus, her connection with Darren was special. They quickly hit it off, and it was evident to everyone that they were deeply in love. And he definitely seemed like he matched her. Just the way he talked to us showed me that he was very respectful. Not long after they began dating, just 1 year into their relationship, Latrice and Darren made the life-changing decision to spend the rest of their lives together. Despite the magnitude of their commitment, they were serious and well-prepared. Both dedicated to their accounting careers, they juggled part-time jobs to support themselves. Latrice worked in the Human Resources Department at Sears and the Triangle Town Center Mall in Raleigh, while Darren was employed at a local firm in Raleigh. So finally, on April 27, 2007, The couple exchanged vows with Latrice officially becoming Mrs. Curtis. The wedding didn't sit well with Latrice's family. Despite her previous introduction of Duran to the family during their dating phase, the news of the wedding hit them like a bomb. Besides Duran's shy, reserved and respectful nature on the surface, they practically didn't know anything about him. So naturally, for everyone in their family and especially for Latrice's protective father, Sherman, the marriage came under intense scrutiny. The thing that wasn't respectful to me was that he never said anything to me about wanting to marry my daughter. I feel like he should have came and talked to me about it, but they never told me anything. The marriage was also a surprise for Latrice's friends. She'd kept everything hush-hush. But one day she came to work. She was in her junior year at the time, and we saw a ring on her finger and she told us, she was like, "You guys, I got married." And we're like, "What?" So we were definitely shocked. Against all odds, the pair moved into an apartment in Austin Grove, Raleigh, starting a new chapter in their lives. They were brimming with hopes and dreams for a joyful and prosperous future. A future that would come crashing down in the most horrific way possible just 9 months later. By January 2008, Latrice, at 21 years old, was in her senior year at the university while Duran had already graduated. During this period, Latrice shifted her classes to the evening, allocating her daytime for work and future planning. It became known among her friends that she was contemplating starting a family, expressing her desire to have a baby right after Christmas that year. However, she confided in a friend, Anisha Baldwin, expressing concerns about Duran not being ready. Sadly, what the future had in store for her was beyond her imagination. On weekdays, Latrice usually returned home at around 8 p.m. after a long day of classes, making the 30-minute drive from Durham to Raleigh. Duran typically arrived home 15 to 30 minutes after her. However, this routine would be disrupted on the night of January 29, 2008, and life would never be the same again. On the cold winter morning of January 30, 2008, around 7:30 a.m., David Jones was heading westbound on Interstate 540. As traffic began to slow down, David glanced to the right and something captured his attention. I was traveling to a meeting going along 540, and as I was driving, I noticed something on the shoulder of the road. He noticed an object on an embankment that stood out from the surrounding foliage along the highway. As he stopped his vehicle and approached for a closer look, he was met with a horrifying sight. It was a dead body. After taking a moment to absorb the shock, he promptly dialed 911 to report the discovery. "I'm on 560 westbound just past, I believe, the Buffalo exit, and I think there's a body on the side of the road." Law enforcement officers discovered the body on an embankment of the I-540 near the Buffalo exit, just as David had reported. The deceased woman was clad in a white shirt and torn blue jeans bearing multiple stab wounds across her body. The vicious attack had drained all the blood from her, rendering her body pale. The extent of the injuries was severe, with gaping holes sliced into her skin. Homicide detectives were called to the scene, and based on the condition of her body, they estimated that she had been deceased for several hours. The number of stab wounds indicated that this was not a random attack but a targeted killing, a deliberate and cruel act. Clearly, somebody wanted her beyond dead. The body was sent for autopsy, and the immediate task was to establish her identity. However, no identification was found on her at that point, and the search for clues continued. Meanwhile, around 9:30 a.m., Latrice's father, Sherman, was watching the news on his television when it was reported that a body had been discovered on I-540. Breaking news. Body found on I-540. Had a tarp over. Nothing clicked. However, he was anxious for a different reason. Sherman had been attempting to reach Latrice, but it got no answer. He also tried to contact Duran without success. The poor father had no inkling that these two events were connected until hours later when he received devastating news from the police. Back at the crime scene, authorities discovered a phone several hundred feet east of the victim's body along the I-540 westbound. The phone had been turned off and exposed to rain in the elements. Additionally, a white Nissan Sentra was located less than a mile away from the scene, believed to belong to the victim. Inside the car, Blood was found and the console was broken, indicating that the attack had occurred within the vehicle. Forensic teams collected DNA samples from various areas in the car for analysis. Running the license plate, they found it registered in the name of 21-year-old Latrice Curtis. Once the victim was identified, a crucial piece of information surfaced. Duran, Latrice's husband, had called 911 that same morning, reporting that his wife hadn't returned home. Duran, 911. Where is your emergency? Emergency is probably, but my wife goes to school out of the North Carolina Central, and she did not come home last night. I talked to her last night. She was on her way home. She was in the car and everything. She hadn't showed up. The last known place she was at MCPU. Did you talk to her while she was driving? Yes. She had the radio on and everything. She told me she was stopping to get something in. I don't know if she was still in Durham when she called me or she was on 540 coming back in the room. Duran claimed that he received a call from Latrice the previous night at around 10 p.m. where she informed him that she was on her way home. Surprisingly, as the detectives were examining the car, Duran arrived at the scene. He explained the situation, stating that he was on his way to work and that he took the I-540 as part of his daily routine, and today he'd suddenly spotted his wife's car and stopped. While the investigation was ongoing, Sherman got in touch with the sheriff's department. That's how he learned that his precious daughter had passed away, devastating the entire family. Me and my wife, we didn't say a word to each other going down there. Not one single word. We got down there. It was probably about 11 o'clock and they had to sit in this room. They finally came out and told us that the girl's body that they found on 540 was identified as Latrice. Around 11 a.m., Duran Curtis was also brought in for questioning. During the interview with the detectives, Duran claimed that after receiving the last call from Latrice, he fell asleep and woke up the next morning between 6 to 7 a.m. Realizing that Latrice still hadn't made it back home, he then called the police. As the spouse of the victim, Duran was automatically considered a suspect. On top of this, his story of simply falling asleep during the night and not making an effort to find his wife sounded peculiar to the detectives. It was also suspicious that he was heading to work without any word from his wife but conveniently spotted Latrice's car. Additionally, he lacked an alibi to confirm that he was at home all night. Latrice's family was also disappointed that Duran didn't go out looking for her. Sherman later mentioned that Duran seemed nonchalant about Latrice being missing, and then they would check to see if she was home. My wife's not home. I'm not going to sleep. I'm gonna find out where she's at. However, he cooperated with the authorities by providing his fingerprints and DNA sample and allowing them to photograph him. They also conducted searches of his apartment and car, but found no indications of any wrongdoing. Additionally, they questioned several neighbors about the Curtis's relationship, but none had any specific information to share. Everyone conveyed that they seemed like a happy couple. Reporters do a lot of what police officers do. We try to find people that are close to the victim. I was asked to go knock on Duran Curtis's door. He did not answer the door that day. I don't know if he was home or not. And we spoke to a few neighbors and they basically said we had no idea that there were any issues. We believe that they were just a regular young married couple working hard, coming and going. And no, we never heard anything or saw anything to give us pause. With no evidence tying Duran to the crime scene, he was released, leaving lingering doubts and unanswered questions. Was Duran concealing something? Was their seemingly perfect relationship hiding darker layers? Did Duran possess secrets that could have driven him to harm his wife? However, before detectives could pursue these questions, a significant lead emerged in the case thanks to a tip. From this point, the investigation took a dark turn, unveiling a tale of lies, secrets, and a deadly love triangle. At 1:30 a.m. on the night of the murder, Highway Patrol Trooper Isaac Cooper noticed a Chrysler Pacifica near the crime scene on the I-540. The hazard lights were on, the driver's side window was partially down, and despite intermittent rain, the door was unlocked with the keys in the ignition, but there was no one in sight. It was parked on the opposite side of the I-540 from where Latrice's body was discovered. When the license plate was checked, it was linked to a 43-year-old man named Robert Lee Adams Reeves. a former pastor at Cedar of Lebanon Baptist Church in Brooklyn, New York. Robert resided in Durham, and by January 2002, he'd founded Cedar International Fellowship in Brooklyn, where he served as the minister. Referred to as the bishop, a nickname he gave himself, Robert was widely recognized in his community. Among his friends, Robert was esteemed as an energetic, intelligent, and diligent individual as well as a man of God. Robert was an excellent preacher, excellent teacher, very articulate, very excellent organizer. Anything he put his mind to became excellent because he just excelled and he stayed focused. Robert was well known not only down here in places we traveled, several places around the United States. While Robert was a familiar figure in the church communities of North Carolina, Latrice's family had no prior knowledge of him. Didn't know nothing about Robert Reeves. Never seen him before in my life. I'm looking at him. My daughter's 21. This dude's 50. What in the world is going on? How did she know this guy? What connection did Robert Reeves have with Latrice Curtis, and how did his car end up near the crime scene? To uncover the answers to these questions, authorities questioned Robert Reeves on January 30th, 2008 at around 3 p.m., merely hours after the murder. During interrogation, Robert spoke very little, but he did come forward with information when asked the whereabouts of him and his vehicle. He mentioned that the day before he'd only been to church and then returned home. Robert also said that he'd given his car to his roommate, Stephen Randolph, to drive because his own car was out of service. And there it was, the connection between Latrice Curtis and Robert Reeves with Stephen Randolph, who happened to be a fellow accounting student at NCCU. With a third person now in the mix, the police took Robert's DNA, fingerprints and photos just like they had with Duran. Robert had cuts on his hands and legs, but he explained them away as injuries from moving a desk. While this raised suspicions, authorities lacked substantial evidence against him, so he was let go. The murder investigation became even more complex, with 3 men now under suspicion for the same crime, leaving more questions than answers. You got 3 men involved in this. 1 woman involved in this. What is the connection with these 3 men and this 1 woman? Detectives knew that they had to look into Stephen closely. As a senior at NCCU, he shared the same academic year with Latrice. On campus, he was recognized as a charming ladies' man and a talented basketball player. However, the connection between Latrice and Stephen went beyond mere classmates. Unbeknownst to others, they were engaged in a clandestine affair. On February 1, 2008, 2 days after the gruesome murder, Stephen was brought in for formal interrogation. When questioned about their relationship, he admitted to having an affair with Latrice but downplayed its seriousness. According to Stephen, they grew close while attending classes together and initiated their relationship in September 2007. He claimed to be aware that Latrice was married but asserted that she didn't provide many details. Latrice had told Stephen that she was separated from her husband, whereas in reality, they were newlyweds with no apparent marital issues. Interestingly, Stephen had another girlfriend named Velma Newton who was unaware of Stephen's affair. Latrice seemed to have a good understanding that Stephen wasn't seeking a serious relationship, and she was comfortable with the level of their companionship. Latrice had kept this affair hidden from everyone, including her friends and family, possibly out of fear of their disapproval. She was having an affair. I'm not sure why she didn't tell us. I don't know if she maybe felt like we was gonna judge her. If I knew what she was up to and that she was having an affair, I woulda had a talk with her. We woulda had a serious talk. I always just reminded her of wrong from right, the way you're supposed to do. Probably why she never spoke to me about seeing another man. Because she probably knew exactly what I was gonna do and what I was gonna say. Robert Reeves escorted Stephen Randolph into the police and said he's here, and he was willing to submit to questions to you. He complied with giving his DNA and getting his fingerprints. I think that there is a certain type of criminal who is willing to walk into a police station and is willing to comply with police and wants to come in. They're proud of their handiwork and they want to come in and see if the police can figure it out. Stephen also revealed that it was late in February 2007 when he moved into Robert Reeves' house. Within a few days of settling in, he had invited Latrice over for a study date. One thing led to another and they ended up sleeping together. From that point forward, they occasionally engaged in intimate encounters. According to Stephen, on the evening of January 29, 2008 as well, Latrice came to his place and they ended up sleeping together. After their encounter just before 10 p.m., she decided to go home. Following Latrice's departure, Stephen headed to the residence of his other girlfriend Velma and met with several friends. However, shortly afterward, he received a phone call from Latrice. Latrice told Stephen over the phone that she might be pregnant and wanted to take their relationship further, and he agreed to discuss it the next time they saw each other. Shortly after this phone conversation, he received another call from Latrice's phone. He answered the phone, but no one said anything. Stephen stayed at Newton's house until around 1:30 a.m., then drove home and went to sleep. When he woke up the next morning for an early class, he noticed a call had come in from Latrice's phone around 2 a.m. Stephen also informed the police about another detail. He and his other girlfriend, Velma, had been receiving strange phone calls, and about a month before Latrice died, their tires were slashed. This incident led him to occasionally borrow Robert's car. However, he emphasized that he hadn't taken Robert's car out for about 2 weeks since his own car had been repaired and that he had nothing to do with Latrice's death. Just like the other two men, Stephen gave the police his fingerprints and DNA and was photographed. Although he wasn't ruled out as a suspect just yet, he was let go. After Stephen's interrogation, the detectives were left with a bunch of new questions. Was Stephen being straight with them or spinning a tale? Could he be desperate enough to harm Latrice to protect his image, especially now that she was seeking a more serious relationship? Or did Duran catch wind of his wife's deception and decide to take matters into his own hands? And what role might Robert have played in this whole situation? Unfortunately, these were all just speculations. To nail down solid evidence, the police had to bide their time for the lab test results. Meanwhile, as they attempted to piece together a timeline for the murder, they stumbled upon another nugget of information. Kimberly Parker, one of Latrice's closest friends, also got an odd call from Latrice's cell phone at 2 a.m. on January 30, 2008. She picked up the call and was met with the eerie sounds of wind, footsteps on gravel, and passing cars. I was in my bed, and my phone was ringing. Latrice usually doesn't call late at night. That was kind of strange to me, so I picked up the phone. I heard a lot of movement. I heard cars driving by. It may sound like it was close to the highway. Something inside me just told me to just remain on the phone. I was saying Latrice, 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 Latrice until I hung up the phone. Concerned, Kimberly dialed back, but the call went straight to voicemail. Little did she anticipate the kind of news that awaited her the next time she heard Latrice's name. I got off work, and I went in my mother's room. And my mother, she was like, "Kimberly, that body they found, that was Latrice." And all I could say was no, because she called me last night. I was just like, "No, I don't think it's her." And she kept saying, "Yes, it is." And that's when I broke down. The autopsy report revealed the gruesome details of Latrice's death, indicating that her throat had been slit, and she had suffered around 40 stab wounds to her face, head, neck, and torso. Additionally, she had sustained a blunt force injury to her head, specifically behind her right ear. The disturbing nature of the injuries was heightened by the fact that they penetrated her carotid artery, jugular vein, and even severed her vocal cords. One of the wounds extended from one side of her neck to the other, suggesting an attempt to decapitate her. The reports also noted signs of a violent struggle with damage to Latrice's fingernails. The estimated time of death was between 1 and 2 a.m., implying that when Stephen received his final call from Latrice, followed by her call to Kimberly, she was likely already deceased. But why would the killer use Latrice's phone to contact her loved ones? Was it driven by sadistic pleasure, or was it an attempt to mislead the investigation? Regardless of the answers to these questions, the police didn't have to wait too long to apprehend the perpetrator. On February 2, 2008, Sherman received a phone call informing him that an arrest had been made in his daughter's case. About 2 o'clock in the morning, sheriff called me, told me, "We have the man that killed your daughter in jail." We jumped up. We hugged. We laughed. We cried. We're so happy. And I only had one question. Who did it? To the shock of many, the individual turned out to be Robert Reeves, who was accused of first-degree murder. Despite his protests of innocence, incriminating evidence was discovered, including his DNA found on the steering wheel and other items inside Latrice's car. No additional charges were brought against anyone else. The revelation was met with disbelief by those who knew Robert, particularly considering his standing as the bishop, a respected figure in the religious community. I never known Robert to be a violent person. I never saw him angry. But why would a man with the least connection to Latrice kill her? Was he acting on behalf of someone else, or did he harbor a far more sinister motive? There was no way he should have been in the picture at all. If anything, it should have been a duel between Stephen and Duran. He hadn't been this in the picture at all. I want to know why. Who is this man? Why he do this? It doesn't make sense that he is the guy because he doesn't have a direct connection to Latrice Curtis, and that's frustrating for the family. It is confusing for the media and for the general public who's following this case. The true motives behind Robert's actions didn't become clear until the trial began. On September 29, 2009, the trial of Robert Reeves commenced in a Wake County courthouse. Walking into this trial, the very first thing the prosecutor says in this case, this is going to be a unique case. And it's going to get very complicated, and it's going to get very strange very quickly. The proceedings brought forth a wealth of information with particular emphasis on the testimony of Stephen Randolph, which exposed the dual life led by Robert Reeves. Stephen Randolph first met Robert Reeves in the February while Stephen was working part-time at a car wash and was struggling financially. Curious, Robert asked Stephen what he did for a living, to which Stephen answered that he was trying to find a secure job. Robert, identifying himself as a clinical research associate, offered to assist Stephen in securing employment. Following this, the two met multiple times at South Point Mall, where Robert floated the idea of Stephen living at his house. Stephen didn't have a stable living situation, so he accepted the offer, agreeing to pay $300 per month. Willie Mae Thorpe, Robert's sister, also lived in the house with Robert and had a separate bedroom upstairs, so Stephen moved into the basement. For a short while, Stephen thought his issues were sorted out, but it didn't last. Initially, he had thought that Robert was just being helpful, but he soon realized that there was another side to him. In December 2007, Robert expressed his disapproval of Stephen bringing girls home. Before Stephen could deal with this problem, the situation took a more serious turn. To Stephen's horror, Robert made inappropriate advances towards him, even going so far as to offer him free rent in exchange for agreeing to his terms. Robert asked if Stephen was interested in being involved in an escort service, claiming it would help him financially. Although Stephen considered it, he ultimately told Robert no. Despite this, Robert continued to make advances towards Stephen, who consistently turned him down. Though Stephen was disgusted by Robert's behavior, he was still living in Robert's house as he was still struggling to achieve financial stability. To ensure his own safety, he borrowed a 9mm Ruger from his cousin and kept it under his pillow. Towards the end of February 2007, both Stephen and his girlfriend Velma started receiving threatening phone calls from an anonymous caller. The caller warned Stephen, threatening to end his basketball career and break his legs if he didn't stop whatever activities he was involved in. During one of these calls, the anonymous caller mentioned that he hoped Stephen had a gun. Strangely, Stephen's gun had gone missing earlier that same day. It was later revealed that Robert had confiscated the gun. On December 11, 2007, Stephen intended to go to Velma's house, but his car had a flat tire. He fixed it at a gas station and proceeded to Velma's house. Later that same night, as he left her house to return to Robert's house, he discovered that all 4 of his tires had been slashed. The next day, Robert, being helpful, let Stephen drive his car to school until he could get the money to repair his car. Over the Christmas break in February 2007, Stephen visited his home in Baltimore. Meanwhile, Velma got a strange call where the caller confessed to slashing Velma's tires and said sorry. Soon after, Newton found out her tires were indeed slashed. All these incidents only implicated one man, Robert Reeves. During the investigation, the police found that Robert had 3 phones, a house phone, a cell phone, and a cell phone he called his fun phone, or the one he used for play. This specific phone number matched the calls that Stephen and his girlfriend received. The phone's location also aligned with where the tires had been slashed. The prosecution argued that Robert was obsessed with Stephen Randolph and was determined to pursue a relationship with him at any cost. They believed he chose to kill Latrice in a jealous rage because she stood in the way of his perceived relationship with Stephen. They contended that Robert likely followed Latrice after she left his house on the night of January 29, 2008, and took advantage of an opportunity when she pulled over on the highway, attacking and killing her in a fit of jealous rage. The prosecution also suggested that he used Latrice's phone to make calls after the murder. In addition to the other evidence, the police found a partially melted trash can at Reeves' house containing accelerant and fabric. It was believed that this was an attempt to burn the clothes he wore during the crime. There was a collection of things that revealed the fact that he had this dual life, that he was this bishop and this sexual predator, and it was the motive for the homicide. The defense on their part argued that Robert had a disability. His left arm was half paralyzed because he'd been mugged in New York and stabbed in this arm. They stated that Robert couldn't carry anything heavy with his left hand and didn't have a good grip with that hand, and the use of his left hand was very minimal. Therefore, it wouldn't have been possible for him to stab Latrice so many times with one hand. The defense team also sought to convince the jury that investigators had apprehended the wrong man, asserting that Stephen, not Robert, had a motive for the killing. They argued that Stephen was concerned about the potential of an unwanted pregnancy with Latrice and feared jeopardizing his future. They also highlighted that Stephen had a knife collection which included a cane sword, yet investigators never tested them for blood or DNA evidence. During their closing arguments, Robert's attorneys attempted to cast doubt on the state's case by questioning whether investigators followed proper procedures and protocols in collecting and testing evidence. However, in the end, all these efforts fell short against the enormous physical evidence the state had. After 2 days of deliberations, the jury determined that the state had provided evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Reeves had killed Latrice. On October, Robert Reeves was found guilty of the first-degree murder of 21-year-old Latrice Curtis and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Currently, Robert Reeves is serving his life sentence at the Pasquotank Correctional Institution in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Sherman Jones, the father of the murder victim Latrice Curtis, addressed the media after the conviction of the man who killed his daughter. Expressing his heartbreak, he used strong words to convey his feelings, saying, "There is no more waiting, no more wondering. Maybe now we can go on with our lives. This man, he is a predator. He was tried for one murder, but he killed 3 or 4 of us. He killed my daughter. He killed me, my wife, and he killed himself." While Sherman and the family were undoubtedly relieved at the killer being caught, the pain of losing their beloved Latrice never left them. I really don't know what the word closure mean because I hear it all the time, but it's been 12 years, and I ain't got no closure yet. So I guess I'm still waiting on it to come. I see her every day, and it ain't closed yet. It's still there. It's still there. I still cry. I still wonder why. As we conclude the story, this tragic murder surely leaves a lasting impression on our minds. Latrice may have made a few wrong choices in life, but in no way did she deserve to have her life taken in such a horrific way at the age of 21 with her whole life ahead of her. What's your take on this story? What do you think made Robert so desperate to commit such a gruesome crime? Or do you believe there were more secrets to this deadly love triangle? On May 4, 2003, a stunning event sent shivers through the state of Kentucky. At the heart of this gripping moment was Katie Autry, an 18-year-old embarking on her freshman year at Western Kentucky University in Bowling Green. Tragically, she fell victim to a horrifying and unthinkable act. She was assaulted, subjected to abuse, and ultimately met a devastating fate as she was set on fire inside her dorm room. What do you believe led to this tragic event involving Katie Autry? And who do you think was the monster responsible for this heinous crime? Melissa K. Autry, affectionately known as Katie, entered this world on June 10, 1984 in Regina, Kentucky. Unfortunately, her upbringing was far from easy. In a family of 3, herself, her sister Lisa, and their mother Donnie Rose Autry, difficulties arose primarily from their mother's mental health challenges as she suffered from schizophrenia. When Katie was merely 10 years old, she and her sister were placed in foster care due to these issues. Eventually, she found a sense of stability living with older foster parents, Jim and Shirley Inman in Pellville. Despite these changes, Katie maintained a connection with her biological mother throughout her life. Katie excelled during her high school years, demonstrating academic prowess while also taking on the role of a cheerleader. Despite her petite stature and blonde hair, she made a significant impact. Upon graduating from Hancock County High School in February 2002, Katie made a deliberate choice to attend Western Kentucky University and continue her plan on becoming a dental hygienist. Katie commenced her freshman year at WKU in February, relishing the newfound freedom and experiences that college life offered. She struck up a close friendship that led to her becoming roommates with someone she connected with. Together, they frequented parties, indulged in drinking, and embraced the social scene on campus. During this time, Katie also began to explore her own sexuality, a journey that led to her being labeled with a hurtful nickname, Ho from the Second Flow, as jokingly mentioned by one of her friends named Logan. In her romantic life, Katie was involved in a more extended, intimate relationship with a person named Maurice. However, Maurice was already in a relationship with someone from another town and wasn't seeking a serious commitment with Katie. During her freshman year in college, Katie made a significant choice to emancipate herself from the Kentucky foster care system. This decision was driven by her desire for independence. However, while striving for autonomy, she faced a substantial consequence: losing the financial support she received for her college education as a foster child. With this sudden shift in her circumstances, Katie had to navigate a new reality where she no longer had her college expenses covered. To manage, she reduced her status to part-time enrollment and ventured into multiple off-campus jobs to make ends meet. Among these various occupations, she briefly worked as an exotic dancer in order to support herself financially. Throughout her life, Katie had garnered numerous accolades and honors in both school and college. From being recognized as academic all-state to earning titles like Honor Roll Student of the Month and Most Improved Cheerleader 1998-1999, she had a track record of achievements. However, as she stood at the cusp of eagerly anticipated future endeavors, an unimaginable horror was lurking just around the corner, ready to disrupt her life in a devastating way. On the evening of Saturday, May 3, 2003, Katie and her roommate planned to attend the Pi Kappa Alpha frat party hosted on their campus. Prior to the party, they had been pre-gaming, causing Katie to become intoxicated before arriving. When they reached the party, Katie was already drunk. It was a known trait for Katie to become emotional and tearful when drunk, often requiring her roommate to look after her. Spotting Maurice at the party, Katie asked him to dance, but he declined. This rejection upset Katie, leading to a confrontation between her and Maurice. Her behavior turned frustrating and disruptive, prompting the host to request her departure as she was causing a disturbance. As per the fraternity pledge, they were inclined to drive people home. So one of the attendees volunteered to take Katie back home as she left the party. However, her roommate, who was enjoying herself, opted to stay and promised to check in on Katie later. Expressing gratitude to the driver for ensuring Katie's safe return, the roommate planned to spend the night elsewhere with a friend but became concerned about Katie's well-being. Around 2:30 a.m. on May 4, 2003, a short while after Katie had left the party, the roommate called to verify Katie's arrival home and ensure she was safe. Katie answered the phone and told her roommate she was lying in bed. She then told her roommate there was a guy in her room, and she was scared. Katie even told her roommate that she didn't know the guy that was in her room. Seeking reassurance, the roommate asked to speak with the individual in Katie's room. A male voice came on the line, identifying himself as the person who had escorted Katie home. He explained that he ensured her safe arrival to a room due to her intoxicated state, reassuring the roommate not to be alarmed. Before ending the call, Katie's roommate sensed the presence of a second male voice in the room. Despite this, she wasn't overly worried and assured Katie that they'd catch up in the morning. But about a half an hour later, the fire alarm rang out at Hugh Poland Hall, a typical occurrence in a college dormitory, often triggered by someone mistakenly burning popcorn. Students, some groggy from sleep and others still under the influence of alcohol, began evacuating the building, assuming it was just another false alarm. However, when firefighters emerged with a severely burned body, the gravity of the situation hit them. It became evident that something incredibly serious had occurred. The first responders swiftly entered the dorm room, pinpointing the origin of the fire. Upon entering, a firefighter noticed that the sprinkler system had already extinguished the flames, but something caught their eye, a shimmering object on the bed. It wasn't until closer inspection that they realized it was a person noticing a faint rise and fall of a chest. It was Katie Autry, severely beaten and burned, with a shirt covering her face and another piece of fabric wrapped around the sprinkler system. The scene revealed a harrowing truth. Katie herself was the source of the fire, a result of someone setting her ablaze while she was still alive. As they carefully carried her out of the building, she uttered to the firefighters, "Take me home." Katie suffered severe burns, particularly to her chest and genital area, and investigators found evidence of a hairspray used as an accelerant. Additionally, alcohol gel was discovered inside her, presumably in an attempt to erase potential evidence of an assault. Katie's critical condition required her transfer to Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville, Tennessee. Doctors revealed the severity of her burns, indicating that they likely destroyed a significant portion of her nerve endings, providing a tragic relief by potentially reducing her level of pain. Despite the diligent medical attention she received, Katie tragically succumbed to her injuries, passing away 3 days later on May 7, 2003. The Western Kentucky police initially focused on Katie's roommate's absence that night given their unusual companionship. Her roommate clarified she was with another friend and disclosed the unsettling phone call involving Katie and an unidentified male. This led authorities to investigate the designated driver who claimed to have brought Katie home. During the interview, he denied knowledge of what happened to Katie after dropping her off. They also questioned Katie's so-called boyfriend, Maurice, who had an alibi. However, their attention returned to the designated driver when new information surfaced revealing that Katie wasn't the sole passenger in the vehicle that night. There was indeed another person. When questioned further, the driver who had escorted Katie home that night admitted that Katie had a friend accompany her in the car. This individual turned out to be a 20-year-old named Stephen Souls. Stephen Souls, a resident from nearby Scottsville, wasn't a student at WKU. That night, he'd accompanied friends to the party, but became intoxicated and ended up passing out in the back of the car. During the ride back to Katie's dorm, Katie playfully teased Stephen about his condition, calling him sick boy. Upon arriving at Katie's dorm, she exited the car. At that point, Stephen informed his friend that he wanted to approach Katie and holler at her and got out of the car. That moment marked the driver's last sighting of Stephen Souls. When brought in for questioning, Stephen Souls was already known within his community as a dishonest individual prone to theft. He was a year or two older than Katie and had a reputation for idleness, not being enrolled in school or holding a job. Often achieved with underachievers in Scottsville, Kentucky, he had a track record of spending time with fellow cannabis users. While Stephen hadn't been involved in any significant legal issues, he was recognized among his peers as a deceitful person involved in dishonest practices, earning labels such as liar, cheat, and thief. Many in his social circle distrusted him, perceiving him as someone who took advantage of others. From Souls' statement, authorities gathered that he and a group of friends had also attended the fraternity party that evening. They had been drinking heavily and were significantly intoxicated by the time the party commenced. Souls claimed he felt unwell and opted to rest in the back of a friend's vehicle to recover. He mentioned that during the drive to Katie's dorm, he and she were engaging in playful behavior and making out. And at that point, that's all he initially disclosed regarding the events. When questioned, Souls denied going up to Katie's dorm room. However, he eventually confessed that after Katie left the vehicle, he followed her and managed to sneak through the dorm room door before it closed. He admitted to following Katie up to her room and acknowledged being intimate with her. As police continued their discussions with Souls, his narrative underwent multiple alterations. Ultimately, when confronted with accusations of causing harm to Katie, he insisted that he hadn't harmed her himself but claimed to know who had. This revelation drastically shifted the direction and focus of the entire investigation. According to Souls, while he was spending time with Katie in her room, his friend, a man named Goodram, contacted him inquiring about his location. Souls informed Goodram of his whereabouts and, subsequently, Goodram arrived at Katie's dorm room. Soul recounted that upon Goodram's arrival, Goodram expressed a desire to engage in intimate activities with Katie. However, when Katie refused, Souls claimed that Goodram, driven by anger, violently assaulted her. According to Souls, Katie attempted to defend herself, but due to Goodram's larger size, she couldn't escape his grip. Souls alleged that he witnessed the horrifying scene as Lucas Goodram proceeded to torture and set Katie on fire. Upon conducting a background check on Lucas Goodram, authorities discovered that he was 21 years old in the February and wasn't enrolled as a student at WKU or any other educational institution. His history revealed a pattern of instability, lacking steady employment or pursuing further education. Goodram had already experienced a failed marriage and was a father to a young son. Allegations from his ex-wife suggested that Goodram had been abusive toward her. Moreover, the day prior to Katie's attack, Goodram had been arrested on domestic violence charges related to his then-girlfriend. These details painted a troubling picture of Goodram, indicating a history of violent behavior and instability, portraying him as someone with a troubled past and concerning behavior. Goodram's family background revealed that his mother had married his stepfather, who happened to be an heir to the well-known Dollar General stores. With this familial connection to wealth, Goodram often received financial support despite his reluctance to work, frequently indulging in substance abuse. Eventually, he relocated to Scottsville with his mother and stepfather. Now, as far as the two suspects were concerned, Soul and Goodram shared a friendship, but also had frequent disputes, largely stemming from Goodram's perception of Sauls as a freeloader and dishonest individual. There was an incident where Sauls allegedly told Goodram's girlfriend that Goodram was cheating on her, resulting in an argument between the two. In the heat of the moment, Goodram resorted to using a racial slur directed at Souls, who was of mixed race. Despite these tensions, on the night of May 3rd, both agreed to spend time together and attended the party in the company of mutual friends. When questioned by the police, Goodram admitted to encountering Katie at the party, but denied ever visiting her dorm room. But evidence surfaced from her resident assistant at another dorm, placing Goodram in the lobby of that building around 2:30 a.m., coinciding with the time of the phone call between Katie and her roommate. However, despite these details, Goodram staunchly maintained that he had no knowledge of the assault and murder of Katie Autry. Furthermore, both his stepfather and mother asserted that he was at home before the fire alarms went off at 4 a.m., providing him with an alibi for the time of the incident. The police suspected that there was more to the story than what had been disclosed. They leaned towards accepting Stephen Soul's version of events from that night, highlighting Goodram's known history of violence in contrast to Soul's lack of such a history. According to the police, they found no substantial reason to distrust Stephen Soul's narrative. As a result, on May 12, 2003, both Souls and Goodram were apprehended and charged with first-degree capital murder. The gravity of the charges meant that they were both facing the possibility of the death penalty. While awaiting trial, forensic analysis revealed DNA evidence retrieved from inside Katie's body. Despite attempts to erase evidence through alcohol gel use and burning, male bodily fluid was discovered and it matched Stephen Soul's DNA. However, there is no evidence found in the room that could be attributed to Lucas Goodram. Upon questioning, Soul admitted to assaulting Katie, but claimed that he did so only after threats from Goodram, fearing for his own life if he refused. Despite Soul's admission, the lack of substantial evidence against Lucas Goodram left authorities uncertain about securing a conviction against him. Given the dilemma surrounding the case and the lack of evidence against Goodram, authorities opted to offer Stephen Soul a deal. In the agreement, Stephen Soul consented to plead guilty to a range of charges encompassing murder, assault, sodomy, arson, robbery, complicity to commit robbery, and complicity to commit assault. As a result of this plea deal, the death penalty was removed as a potential punishment for Stephen Soul. In return for this plea, Soul was obligated to testify against Lucas Goodram during Goodram's imminent capital murder trial. During his testimony, Stephen Soul altered his account once more. He maintained that Goodram was the individual responsible for the initial attack, beating, and assault on Katie. However, Soul now asserted that after being coerced by Goodram to commit assault, he was the one who sprayed the hairspray and set Katie on fire. He claimed that these actions were carried out under Goodram's instructions and threats. This new testimony contradicted his previous statement where he'd implicated Goodram as the one who burned Katie alive. According to the evidence, Stephen Soules was the sole individual whose DNA was discovered at the crime scene. He ultimately confessed to both and setting Katie on fire, leading to her tragic death. Conversely, Lucas Goodram had an alibi for that night and vehemently denied any involvement. No conclusive evidence directly linked Goodram to the crime. The only connection was Soules' testimony and a statement from a jailhouse informant alleging Goodram's confession while awaiting trial. However, this evidence was deemed insufficient by the jury. Consequently, Lucas Goodram was acquitted of all charges and subsequently released in February 2005. Prosecutor Chris Coron accused Goodram's parents of dishonesty in their attempts to shield them from legal repercussions. Despite these accusations, the evidence fell short in keeping Goodram incarcerated. Goodram, having spent the past 2 years in jail, expressed indifference towards Soules, stating, "I don't have feelings either way." He expressed his contentment at being released and regaining freedom, rejoicing and reuniting with his family. Goodram mentioned plans to relocate to Texas to work on his family's ranch. Katie's family experienced profound devastation, believing that Lucas Goodram escaped justice for the rape and murder of their loved one. Stephen Soules, however, received a sentence of life imprisonment with no chance of parole. Presently, he remains in the Kentucky Department of Corrections, serving a sentence for his involvement in the tragic events surrounding Katie's death. This case has already captured significant attention within the community. The public's involvement and their perception of the events became a major news story at that time, drawing widespread interest and discussion. The controversy surrounding Goodram, who was white and affluent, contrasted with Soules, who was of mixed race and less financially privileged, escalated the case to another level of intensity. Many individuals held the belief that Goodram's freedom was facilitated by his wealth, allowing him access to top-tier legal representation, a privilege not afforded to Soules. This disparity in resources fueled widespread perceptions of unequal treatment within the legal system. The Internet also became a platform for discussions regarding the racial dynamics of the case. Despite Soules not being viewed as innocent, a prevailing opinion emerged that his mixed-race identity played a central role in the case's focus. Moreover, the subsequent years saw Lucas Goodram facing charges of domestic violence and making terroristic threats against his ex-wife. After relocating to Texas, he withdrew from the public eye and his current whereabouts remains unknown. Despite widespread belief in Goodram's guilt, certain unanswered questions continue to puzzle investigators and the public. The dorm rooms required resident keycards for access. While Stephen Soules admitted to following Katie just before the door closed behind her, the mystery remained regarding how Goodram could have gained entry into the building later. Additionally, the absence of Goodram's DNA on Katie's person, while Soules' DNA was found, raised further questions. However, the credibility of Goodram's parents' alibi clashed with the account from another individual in a separate dorm who claimed that Goodram was present there at 2:30 a.m. These lingering uncertainties contributed to the ongoing intrigue surrounding the case. So even though Goodram might have been involved or might have been the main criminal mind behind this heinous act, this time, the authorities failed to provide the evidence needed. And that's something that cannot be changed. Either Goodram was a brilliant criminal or he wasn't involved at all. So what do you think actually transpired inside the dorm room on that fateful night? Was Goodram the main mastermind, or was Soules the sole monster of this story? You don't care. This furious message was just one of many that Maria Spencer sent to her estranged husband, Frank Spencer. Frank, on the flip side, was terrified for his life, living in fear, not just of Maria, but of her infamous father, Roco Franklin, a man with a criminal reputation connected to the mafia. Come on. I got no beef with Frank Spencer. If I had a beef, I'd have broke his face a long time ago. Now I don't mind breaking somebody's brakes, but they deserve it. When tragedy struck with 2 mysterious house fires in both Frank's mother's and his girlfriend's house, suspicions ran high. Though Roco had something else to say for himself. I'm not a violent guy. Unfortunately, there was not enough evidence. And as a result, there were no legal consequences. But the nightmare reached its peak on July 3rd, 2012, when 46-year-old Frank Spencer was found dead in his Bloomsburg home, shot 2 times. The question lingered. Were Maria and her father responsible? Or were these threats merely the cries of a heartbroken woman? Frank T. Spencer entered this world on November 10, 1965, born to Cypress C. Spencer and Madeline Benza Spencer. While details about his life remain somewhat elusive, Frank spent his formative years alongside his 2 sisters, Audrey and Phyllis, and his brother, Stephen. In 1984, he proudly graduated from Bloomsburg High School, leaving his mark as a standout member of the wrestling team. Continuing his educational journey, Frank earned his degree from Bloomsburg University in 1988. Known for his kind and jovial personality, Frank was a beloved figure in the town, with many considering him their closest friend. Frank Spencer was like a big teddy bear. He was one of a kind. Great person, outstanding friend. I've talked to at least 5 of Frank's friends who've all told me they were Frank's best friend. I think that speaks volumes about who Frank Spencer was. Among his interests, Frank found joy in participating in go-kart races, a passion rooted in his family's involvement in the auto parts and auto sales business. Friends often described him as fiercely competitive and someone who never backed down from a challenge. Despite this competitive spirit, Frank was known for his strong work ethic and gratitude for everything life offered. In 1995, following the passing of his father, Frank assumed ownership of Spencer's Auto Parts and Used Cars, a family business located in a junkyard behind his childhood home. Frank crossed paths with his future wife, Maria Zanuti, in 1992. Maria, born to Anthony Rocco Franklin and Betty Collins, spent her early years in New Jersey as part of a large Italian-American family. Similar to Frank, Maria was one of 4 siblings. Described as beautiful, smart, and outgoing during her formative years, Maria pursued a law degree from the then unaccredited law school in Georgia and briefly held admission to the Georgia bar. Opting for a career in law marked a divergence for Maria from the trajectory set by her father, Rocco Franklin, who had immersed himself in a life of criminal activities. Rocco spent a significant portion of his adult life within the Pennsylvania state prison system, often claiming to be a hitman for the mob. Despite Rocco's frequent and prolonged absences, his influence loomed large in shaping his children's upbringing. He instilled in them a deep distrust of and non-cooperation with law enforcement. Interestingly, Maria seemed to relish her father's tough guy persona and had no qualms about it. Following Betty's divorce from Morocco, she relocated to Pennsylvania with all of her children. They established their home in the Salinsgrove area, which is in close proximity to Bloomsburg, where fate eventually brought her into contact with Frank Spencer. Even though their relationship rapidly advanced, Frank and Maria possessed entirely different personalities. Frank was known for being one of the nicest and most down-to-earth individuals, whereas Maria had a wild side to her. Interestingly, it was this contrast in their personalities that added a spark to their relationship. I think sometimes people are attracted to people who maybe represent a part of their personality they're missing or a part of their life that they're wishing to have more of. And I think certainly Maria looked like that to Frank in the beginning because she was kind of exciting. You couldn't really predict what she was going to do. She was adventurous. As time passed, the couple envisioned a life together. And in 1997, they decided to elope. Over the years, they welcomed 2 children into their family, a son named Cyrus and a daughter named Frankie. During the late 1990s and early 2000s, they embodied the essence of a classic American family. The children were athletically inclined, well known in the community, and had a substantial circle of friends. The Spencer family often hosted gatherings with people coming over to hang out. Despite outward appearances of familial bliss, things were not as they seemed. Within the confines of their home, Frank and Maria found themselves frequently at odds. Their marriage became a cycle of breaking up and making up. The root of their discord lay in fundamental differences and their outlooks in life, and over time, these conflicts intensified. Frank's strong commitment to his business became a major point of contention with Maria. She felt burdened by the responsibilities of family and children, unable to pursue the adventurous lifestyle she desired. From her perspective, this was not what she had signed up for. On the contrary, Frank was troubled by Maria's lack of interest in raising kids, and her unpredictable temper posed challenges for him as well. Ironically, the passion that initially attracted Frank to Maria now became the most irritating aspect of their relationship. They also grappled with issues of infidelity between them. The challenges of their difficult marriage gradually became apparent to those within their inner circle, with friends noting that when the Spencers disagreed, especially Maria, it was far from a calm affair. You could tell there was just venom. Didn't matter who was there. She'd fly in screaming, slamming car doors. Around February 2005 or February 2006, Frank Spencer went to Sergeant Scott Traw of the Hemlock Township Police Department about a situation he found on his computer at home. Frank explained that he and Maria were going through problems in their marriage and he'd come across searches on the computer about causing harm to someone. He believed these searches were aimed at him. Since there wasn't enough evidence to proceed with an investigation, no actions were taken. By the February, the marriage was falling apart from every angle. So on November 15, 2006, Frank officially filed for divorce. Even during the separation, Frank's top concern was his 2 children. They were his top priority. Recognizing that divorce is especially tough on kids, Frank wanted to give his children a stable home. He decided that until the divorce was finalized, the kids would continue living in their Fairview Drive house. While one parent would stay in the home with the kids, the other would move out. This way, the kids wouldn't have to deal with the hassle of living in different places, a common challenge for kids in a divorce. Frank said that kids shouldn't be punished by having to go to their mother's house or their father's house. This is your house. So this week I live here. Then that week, I'll leave, and that the kids should try to have as stable as life as they possibly can. Despite this arrangement, their home was far from stable. After the separation, there were numerous instances where the couple reconciled and lived together for months at a time. However, their relationship was far from smooth sailing. In fact, matters escalated to the point where law enforcement became involved. From July 2006 to December 2009, there were 21 reports filed with the HTPD, but no charges were pressed. Frank chose not to press charges. Instead, he wanted incidents documented expressing concerns for his safety. According to their friends, despite the challenges, Maria was reluctant to divorce Frank. Not content with merely expressing her feelings, she went on to make threats on his life. Over the years, Maria had conveyed to people that if Frank ever threatened her with divorce, she would have him killed. And after the divorce filings, she was becoming increasingly vocal about it. While the police never arrested Maria for these threats, she did run into legal trouble after an altercation with Frank's mother. The incident transpired on March 7, 2008 at the W. Evans Elementary School in Columbia County after both Frank's mother, Madeline, and Maria had arrived to pick up Frank and Maria's daughter. Following an argument, Maria obstructed Madeline's car, forcibly took the child, pushed Madeline, and placed Frankie in her own car without properly securing her, after which she sped away. Consequently, Marie was arrested and faced charges of disorderly conduct, harassment, and endangering the welfare of a child as she failed to secure the child in the car. Tom Leopold, who served as the assistant district attorney at the time, handled the case but didn't believe he could nail down the child endangerment charge. And so I agreed to dismiss that charge in exchange for the plea to the 2 other offenses. Marie entered a guilty plea for the other 2 charges. The sentence imposed included a $600 fine along with 6 months of probation. However, rather than quelling Maria's anger, this incident fueled it further. She continued to openly threaten Frank's life at times in the presence of others. Frank had been reporting these threats to local law enforcement for years, driven by genuine fear for his life. It wasn't just Maria he was scared of, he also feared her father, Roco Franklin. Maria often used her father to intimidate Frank, going back as far as the late 1990s. Once she told her employer that if Frank ever laid a hand on her, her father would send someone to take care of him. Around that same year, Maria would frequently tell coworkers at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission that she would one day kill her husband, according to testimony from coworkers. One woman who worked at the commission called her the Black Widow. Interestingly, during that period, Roco was still incarcerated at the state correctional institution. To the corrections officers at the facility, Roco expressed his disdain for his son-in-law. He made it clear that he disliked Frank and disapproved of the way he treated Maria. Roco went as far as stating, "I'll have him taken care of. I know people," referring to Frank and his mother as pieces of shit. Roco's anger intensified upon reading in the newspaper about the argument between his daughter and Frank's mother over the custody at the school. He declared that if Frank didn't cease harassing his daughter or engaging in the activities he was involved in, he had something planned for Frank. He also left a remark, "He'll get what he deserves." I think in hindsight, obviously people wish they had taken these threats more seriously. But the reality, during that particular time, people were listening and dismissing, and probably talking it up to what they did. Oh, she's a black widow, but not really thinking that it would actually happen. Despite his intense animosity towards Frank, in early 2009, Roco submitted a home plan form in which he stated his intention to stay at the Fairview Drive residence upon his release. When a parole agent conducting an investigation visited the home and spoke to Frank, he objected, citing the ongoing divorce proceedings with Maria. Consequently, the plan was denied. By February 2009, Frank and Maria's divorce battle had endured for 3 long years and was still far from resolution. While contending with these challenges, Frank was moving on with his life. In June 2009, Frank Spencer encountered a new woman, Julie Dent, through mutual friends, and they quickly entered into a romantic relationship. Did the two of you hit it off right away? We did. Frank and I both admit that we were both smitten at the same time when meeting each other. Maria didn't handle this news well. When she found out that Julie had also spent time with her children, she was furious and left threatening messages and voicemails to Julie. "Hey Julie, it's Maria Spencer. You can go out with Frank, but do not, make no mistake about it, watch my children. Hey Julie, it's Maria Spencer. Do me a favor. Don't watch my children. Do not get between me and Frank by doing my children. Do you understand me?" But soon, Maria would gain an upper hand in the situation when Roco Franklin was released from prison after serving 5 years on theft charges. On July 16, 2009, Roco was paroled, and he initially lived in the Harrisburg area near Frank's home. Maria was using her father's newfound freedom through veiled threats to play mind games. These are the 2 voice messages Maria had sent Frank. "Hey Frank, it's Maria. Listen, I know for some strange reason you'll think that I was attempting to threaten you or I was attempting to scare you back to me or don't know how your mind works. But, Lisa, I know you and I are done. And I've seen you in 2 weeks except for court. Every day I get a little better with it. I was surprised to find that my father wants an apology. That's what I'm, a little thing, not a little joke. He's an old man. He's got funny ways. He just wants you to say sorry, and I got nothing to do with it. So I thought I'd let you know because I care about you, because I wanted you back, not because I wanted to frighten you. Anyway, just wanted you to know that he wanted an apology. If you want to be stubborn about it, that's on you. Take care. Do you really think that's worth me? Truly back, are you really gonna see this? You won't win unless I let you in. Do you understand? You don't win, Spencer. You keep with me because I'm not with you. I mean it, Spencer. I'm done. You didn't get the last message? I told her to apologize to my dad. You know what? Don't apologize. I don't care anymore. Don't care. And according to his friends, Frank was terrified. He started changing his habits when her father was out of jail because he was very concerned about something happening to him. And as it seemed, this string of threats would soon escalate into a criminal act. On the night of Halloween, October 31, 2009, a break-in unfolded within Spencer's Millville Road residence where Frank's mother lived, gaining access through a rear window. Oddly enough, nothing valuable was taken, but business records from Frank's office on the first floor were stolen. When Frank discovered this on November 1, 2009, he immediately suspected Maria and her father of the intrusion. He thought it had to do with the divorce and custody battles happening in court. Those records were crucial for Maria as they could substantiate Frank's income. The day following the apparent break-in, Maria contacted Tom Leopold, the same individual who had once prosecuted her. Interestingly, Leopold had now become Maria's divorce attorney while still serving as an assistant DA. While it may sound unusual, such arrangements are permitted for part-time prosecutors in Pennsylvania. In terms of appearances, do you understand why for some, it's troubling that you took on Maria Spencer because she'd had all these run-ins with the law? Doesn't that compromise you? It did not compromise me. I had no contact and no involvement with any criminal matter involving Frank Spencer or Maria Spencer after I undertook to represent her in the divorce. None. When Maria called him, she had some interesting news to share. The day after the apparent break-in, I received a phone call from Maria Spencer saying that she had found a trash bag on the front porch of her mother's house with all these business records in it. Following Frank's report of the break-in and theft to HTPD, along with his suspicions, Sergeant Tron initiated an investigation. He had a chat with Maria, gathered all the proof, and brought it to the district attorney, Gary Norton, for a review. I consulted with the district attorney at that time, and then I reviewed the entire case with him. And he determined that there was not enough to pursue criminal charges against Maria Spencer. Even though Maria's lawyer eventually handed back the papers to Frank, the burglary remained unsolved. Yet, in the minds of Frank's family and friends, they were convinced of who was behind it all. Little did they realize this was just the tip of the iceberg. As 2010 unfolded, the ongoing feud between the Spencers escalated with Maria continuing to unleash threats. Julie Dent, being Frank Spencer's girlfriend, found herself in the crossfire. Maria began sending harassing texts to Julie threatening to burn down Frank's home. I've never been threatened. I really chalked it up to just a bully that she was just running her mouth as she so often did. Despite facing these challenges, Frank and Julie attempted to maintain a semblance of normalcy in their lives. In January 2010, they eagerly planned a romantic getaway to the Caribbean. Unfortunately, Maria was privy to their plans and had her own schemes in motion. In a series of text messages sent in late January 2010, Maria repeatedly brought up the topic of the upcoming vacation. She insinuated that Frank was only going on the trip with Julie because he had made a promise to her and didn't want to let her down. Maria then attempted to persuade Julie Dent to visit her, suggesting, "Bring a friend if you are afraid of me." Despite Julie's decision not to respond to these intimidating messages, Maria seemed to have something else brewing in her mind. On January 23, the day before Julie and Frank were supposed to leave for their vacation, Maria had lured him out that night by saying that they could work out the divorce and custody issues and that she was willing to give him primary physical custody of the children. Frank was reluctant to go but went and ended up spending the night with her at Genetti Hotel in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. But that was not the only thing to go wrong for the Spencers that day. In the early morning hours of January 24, the Millville Road home where Frank's mother lived went up in flames. Initially, there was significant concern that Frank's mother and his children were inside the house, which was completely engulfed in flames. Luckily, they weren't home at the time and were safely accounted for. Sadly, the children's dog perished in the fire. The Pennsylvania State Police were notified about the fire to get a fire marshal on the scene to figure out where and how it all started. Around 9 a.m., Maria gave Frank a ride back to the Fairview Drive home. She took a route that avoided passing by his business and house so he wouldn't catch wind of the fire. After leaving him, she proceeded to drive off Millville Road and up to the driveway to the spot where the place was still smoldering, wearing a nasty smile. Smirk on her face, turned around and left. That was that. After Maria departed, Frank arrived on the scene and upon discovering the situation, informed the authorities of his strong belief that Maria and Roco were involved in the incident. However, the fire marshal stated that because the fire completely destroyed the structure of the house, it was impossible to determine if arson was the cause, leading the fire to be classified as undetermined. Frank had enough of just having things on record and wanted someone behind bars. Teaming up with his divorce lawyer, Joel Weist, he approached the police for assistance. Frank was extremely angry that they could not figure out why or how the fire started. Frank and I approached everybody we could think of in the law enforcement community. I still to this day do not know if there was ever an investigation. Sergeant Traw from HTPD did engage with Maria, creating a case file. However, given the fire marshal's inconclusive findings, there were limited avenues for further action. But Maria wasn't exactly sitting on the sidelines either. Even though she denied it when confronted, her text messages to Frank seemed to have a taunting vibe. In one of her texts, Maria said, "Karma is a wonderful thing. You wrecked my life. I feel a lot better about it now that your whole life went up in flames. Makes it fair." Another text said, "I will make her lose her job, her home, and you," referring to Julie Dent. Over time, Maria's threats grew bolder and more public. On May 19, 2010, Frank informed the HGPD that Maria opposed Julie attending any of the children's games. He asserted that Maria threatened to burn down Julie's house by the end of the summer if she didn't comply, drawing a parallel to the fire incident in Frank's house. Subsequently, on June 1, 2010, Frank once again reported to the HGPD that Maria had angrily declared he would never build another house there, vowing to burn it down just as she had done with the previous one. Just a few months later, on August 25, 2010, Julie Dent was sleeping alone in her old Valley School Roadhouse in Valley Township, Pennsylvania, and woke up with a jolt late in the evening to what sounded like gunshots. As she heard a couple of more hits, she realized that it was the sound of breaking glass. She opened a window, jumped from her second-story porch roof, and called 911 from a neighbor's house. She survived but was shaken. Julie and Frank were convinced that the fire was set on purpose, just like they believed happened at Frank's mother's house. Since Julie lived in a different county, they were hoping for a better outcome this time. Unfortunately, even this time around, the fire marshal that night concluded there wasn't enough evidence to confirm it was arson. However, everything changed the following morning when Julie's home insurance company sent a fire inspector. To everyone's surprise, he made a crucial discovery. Adjacent to the window, a car jack was found, suggesting it had been used to break the glass. In a wheat field near the house, a gallon jug with gasoline in the bottom and a road flare were discovered, clear indications of a firebomb. Following these discoveries, the state police brought back the fire marshals. After more thorough examination, they detected traces of gasoline on the stairs. Eventually, this incident was officially declared as arson. Once again, Frank and Julie were convinced that Maria and her father were the culprits behind this act. Yet no arrests were made. Sticking to her usual pattern, Maria engaged in a game of taunts. About 2 weeks after the fire, she casually strolled by Julie during a football practice and tossed a comment asking, "Julie, how does life feel?" Fearing for their safety, Julie and Frank took extreme precautions. Julie relocated to a new apartment and Frank refrained from visiting for 3 months. The children were kept unaware of Julie's new residence. The couple even took a brief break from each other before eventually finding their way back together. Had the two of you talked about spending the rest of your lives together, perhaps? We did. On June 8, 2012, the legal saga of Frank and Maria Spencer reached its conclusion with their divorce, marking the end of a nearly 6-year battle. Although they shared joint custody at the time, the court awarded the Fairfield drive home to Frank, but it was now off limits to Maria. The sole exception was the driveway where the transfer of the children could take place. Frank was finally free to do his own thing, but his mental state wasn't allowing him to savor it. Sinking into depression, he harbored a profound belief that he was on the brink of being murdered and he felt powerless to prevent it. Unfortunately, the gravity of his belief and the truth behind it were not apparent to those around him. On June 30, 2012, a mere 3 weeks after their divorce was officially granted, the news of their marital split appeared in the Press Enterprise newspaper among various other divorce announcements. Maria was enraged by this development, and an even more infuriating incident was on the horizon. On that very evening, both Frank and Maria attended a baseball game where Frank's son was playing, and things went south. Maria at that time was dealing with diabetes and mobility issues, and that day, for some reason, Frank decided to mock her about her limitations, causing her public embarrassment. Perhaps a fatal mistake. After the game wrapped up, Frank and Julie headed to the Millville Carnival. It was during this outing that he encountered an old friend. In a disturbing remark, Frank stated, "I believe I am as good as gone. She has got something brewing, so this may be the last time I see you." Little did he know how prophetic his words would turn out to be. The final time Julie would see her boyfriend was on the morning of July 1, 2012, when Frank left her house. For the next 2 days, there was complete radio silence from him. Despite numerous efforts from family members and friends by calls and messages, there was no response. Among those worried was Joe Yodock, a longtime friend of Frank Spencer, and I had been texting him because we had issues we had to work on with the go-karts. Joe and Frank had a long history of racing go-karts together with their kids. So after 2 days of no communication from him, on the morning of July 3, 2012, with apprehension in his mind, Joe went to Frank's Fairview Drive home in an attempt to locate his friend. I'll never forget it. I was pulling down the driveway and I thought, man, I hope I don't find him dead. But when he walked into the house, he came across a scene that was nothing short of horrifying. The lifeless body of 46-year-old Frank Spencer was lying just inside the front door of the home. And he'd had this look of peace, calmness that he hadn't had in a long time. I stepped over his legs, and I noticed what looked like dried blood in his ear. Now I realized what happened, and that he wasn't alive. Sergeant Scott Traw was the one who showed up at the scene. Given his prior knowledge of Frank and Maria's situation, this was a tough experience for him too. Recognizing the complexity of the case, Sergeant Traw promptly requested that the Pennsylvania State Police take charge of the investigation into Frank Spencer's death. Corporal Sean Williams was assigned as the criminal investigator for the case, and he led a team of detectives in thoroughly examining the crime scene. Right in front of the entry door, there is a big spot where blood had been cleaned up. Evidence suggested that a broom was used to push the blood up against the house. Detectives also noted dry clotted blood underneath the entry threshold along with blood splatter on the door jamb and oil on the weather stripping. Upon closer inspection of the crime scene, it became apparent that Frank was likely standing having either opened or partially opened the door when he was shot. His body was not found in a natural position indicating manipulation by someone else. Analyzing drag marks on the tile, detectives concluded that Frank was likely shot outside the front door, and his body was then dragged into the home. Frank was found wearing the same clothes he had been seen in 2 days prior, a gray t-shirt and camouflage shorts. There was blood pooling on one side of his body, suggesting that he may have been lying there for a while. This led investigators to believe that he was shot on July 1, 2012, the same day he was last seen. He had 2 gunshot wounds, one through his left bicep into his torso and another in the head. Beyond theories, detectives discovered crucial evidence of the crime scene. One significant piece was a shoe impression found in the blood. Although unidentifiable at that moment, investigators recognized it as a key trace left by the perpetrator. Furthermore, an out-of-place yellow cleaning glove was observed in the kitchen, a detail that seemed odd given that the home did not appear freshly cleaned. Investigators surmised that the perpetrator might have used the glove in an attempt to clean up the crime scene. As investigators meticulously processed the crime scene, they observed 2 notable absences. Frank's car, a Harley-Davidson pickup truck, and his dog, a Weimaraner named Muttley, were both missing from the house. The car was eventually located in Sunbury Township, approximately 30 miles from the murder scene. Intriguingly, it was found just a few blocks away from the Brass Key Bar owned by Maria's brother Anthony Sanuti. Detectives took advantage of video surveillance footage obtained from local stores and businesses along the highway surrounding Frank's home to aid in their investigation. They were able to piece together Frank's coming and goings from the night before and the morning after the June 30th baseball game. Frank's truck was captured on surveillance around 9 a.m. on the morning of July 1st, navigating the highway towards Sunbury. Unfortunately, the surveillance footage quality was too low to determine who was driving the vehicle. Based on these recordings, detectives suspected that Frank was murdered around 8:30 that morning. Frank's wallet and credit cards were discovered in the truck, ruling out robbery as a motive for the killing. Notably, the keys to Frank's truck and his cell phone were missing. Equally conspicuous was the absence of Frank's dog, as he was not in the car. This raised a perplexing question for detectives. Why would a killer take the family dog unless they were familiar with it? Eventually, the dog would be found, but with an unexpected twist. As it turned out, on July 1, 2012, the day police believed Frank was murdered, Frank's dog unexpectedly showed up at a wedding venue in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, just 10 miles away from Rocco's house. Detectives theorized that Maria might have instructed Roco to bring the dog for her kids, and at some point during the journey, Muttley accidentally ran away and ended up at the wedding venue. Fortunately, the dog was eventually returned to Frank's mother. While Marie and Roco were already under suspicion, building a solid case required physical evidence. Detectives patiently awaited forensic results, and as expected, the forensic tests played a crucial role. The shoe impressions found at the crime scene were identified as most closely corresponding to a Dr. Scholl's Escape sneaker size 11, the same size and brand known to be worn by Roco. This added weight to their suspicions, but an even more shocking revelation awaited. Ballistics testing unveiled that 2 different bullets were used in the murder. The first shot to Frank's body came from a rifle, while the shot to the head was fired from a small-caliber weapon. This intricate detail added complexity to the investigation. The PSP did a search on the wooded ridge across from the home and located 1 spent shell casing and 1 live round. Additionally, a sniper's nest was located. There is a Y-shaped branch in the tree that's exactly 115 feet from the front door with a clear view. It was determined that the rifle was fired from this position. A gun case was found a few feet from where the sniper's nest was located. That gun case had not been manufactured for 20 years. However, the most crucial evidence emerged from the yellow glove. DNA testing later confirmed that Maria's DNA was present on the inside surface of the glove found on the kitchen floor. This finding raised concerns, especially considering Maria hadn't lived in that house for over a year. The accumulating evidence was pointing more definitively towards her involvement in the crime. While the evidence certainly placed Maria in the house, it didn't conclusively establish her as the killer. Still, things weren't looking great for her, and she wasn't exactly avoiding the suspicion. Just a few days after Frank Spencer's death, one of his friends, Dirk Reed, crossed paths with Maria at a baseball match and decided to confront her. Little did he anticipate what Maria was about to reveal. And we were basically almost nose to nose. And I'm going, why? You took him away from not just your kids, from everybody. What did she say to that, though? I mean, did she say, I didn't kill him? Oh no. What she said was the last thing he saw before he died was me. Reed was taken aback, and Maria might have found some satisfaction in it, but it turned out to be a major piece of evidence for the case. In September 2012, Corporal Williams summoned his 2 main suspects, Maria and her father Roco. Surprisingly, while Maria refused to talk, to everyone's surprise, Roco was willing to speak. On September 12/32, during an interview with Corporal Williams, Roco denied any involvement in the killing and claimed not to know who was responsible. However, when asked if he had been in Frank's house, Roco admitted being there the day before the murder. He stated that he was helping with cleaning, using a push broom, doing dishes, and handling laundry. Roco also mentioned that while he didn't like Frank, they didn't have any serious conflicts. He asserted that he visited his grandchildren 2 or 3 times a week. This time he didn't call Maria first because she was at a baseball game. Roco explained that he took the truck for a drive, contemplating buying it. He added that Frank suggested a wrestling match and promised Roco the truck if he could beat him. Given Roco's history with Frank, this story was far from credible. It seemed as though Roco was strategically placing himself in connection with various items, perhaps to account for any potential discovery of his DNA or fingerprints, the broom, Frank wrists, and his truck. When questioned about his whereabouts on July 1, 2012, Roco initially claimed not to remember, but later asserted that he was in the Harrisburg area the entire day. However, cell phone data contradicted his statement, showing his location traveling between Sunbury and the Harrisburg area, suggesting deception. On September 19, 2012, Roco Franklin underwent a round of questioning. This time, he changed his tune, stating that he was mistaken about the dates and couldn't recall when he stayed in Frank's house. With circumstantial evidence gradually piling up, prosecutors decided to convene a grand jury to assess whether there was enough evidence to charge Maria Spencer and her father, Roco Franklin. During her testimony before the grand jury, Maria asserted that she knew nothing about the case. She claimed to love Frank dearly and denied any responsibility for his death. Additionally, she denied sending intimidating messages or making threats. On his part, Roco also denied everything. He attributed his lack of cooperation to memory issues, stating that he had no recollection of his 2 interviews with the Pennsylvania State Police. Despite their denials, prosecutors were convinced that they had enough evidence against the father-daughter duo. Consequently, they initiated the process of filing charges against Maria Spencer encompassing 2 arsons, burglary, 12 counts of perjury, conspiracy, terroristic threats, and, most significantly, the murder of Frank Spencer. However, due to a process riddled with delays, the charges were not officially filed until July 28, 2014, 2 years after Frank's murder. On the same day, an arrest warrant was issued for Roco Franklin. Unfortunately, immediately after his grand jury testimony, Roco managed to evade authorities by fleeing the country on a plane. The Pennsylvania State Police actively pursuing him located Roco within weeks. He was found living in Argentina and was promptly arrested. However, he fought extradition. So in November 2015, Maria Spencer alone went to trial. During the trial, the prosecution laid out their case presenting a wealth of evidence including a decade's worth of text messages, voicemails, and reports of domestic violence. Multiple witnesses, including several of Frank's friends, testified that Maria had been harassing him for an extended period, threatening to kill him on numerous occasions. The prosecution also introduced DNA evidence to support their case, which placed her at the crime scene. Arguing that Maria had both the motive given her dissatisfaction with the divorce and the opportunity with her father out of jail, the prosecution contended that she conspired to murder Frank Spencer. According to their theories, while Roco fired the first shot from the rifle, Maria fired the fatal shot from close range. In Maria's defense, her legal team argued that she would never have harmed the father of her children, emphasizing her deep love for him. Maria maintained that she was not in the vicinity of Frank's house on July 1, 2010, and instead she was at her mother's residence in Salinsgrove planning to spend the day with her son and new boyfriend. Maria also argued that her physical condition, weakened by diabetes, would have made it impossible for her to pull the trigger. She shifted the blame entirely onto her father, claiming that she had the misfortune of having a criminal father who, in a fit of anger towards her ex-husband, ended up committing the crime. Despite these arguments, after a 2-week jury trial, on November 20, 2015, the jury delivered a guilty verdict against Maria Spencer on all 26 counts. On December 18, 2015, Maria Spencer was sentenced to life without parole plus 50 years. Despite the verdict, outside the courtroom, Maria remained all smiles, sticking to her claim of innocence. "I did not kill Frank Spencer, and I never wanted Frank Spencer to die. I love that man, and not so much that I didn't want anyone else to have him." After resisting extradition for more than 2 years, Roco Franklin was finally extradited back to Harrisburg in April 2017 to face criminal prosecution. In 2018, he was convicted of first-degree murder, criminal conspiracy, burglary, 2 counts of arson, and terroristic threats. On December 27, 76-year-old Anthony Roco Franklin was sentenced to life in prison with an additional 11 to 45 years. In front of the media, Roco maintained that he wasn't a violent person and argued that the authorities didn't have enough evidence to nail him. "Tell me your name." "Anthony Roco Sanuti Franklin." "Okay. And what do you usually go by?" "Roco. Everybody calls me Roco." "Yes. I'm a street guy. I don't bother with people I don't like." Roco Franklin, self-described hitman for the mob. "These people are crazy. I read too many storybooks for you guys." Self-described means it's coming from you, right? "Did you tell anyone that?" "No. I don't know. People say anything. I don't bother you. You should never bother me." "Sure. Okay. Have I never committed a violent crime in my life?" "Do you know that?" "I do." "Okay. So where are they coming from?" "Murder." "Well, this is outrageous. Not one shred of evidence." "You know that. You killed Mr. Spencer?" "Of course not. Don't talk ridiculous. I'm not a violent guy." This story should have ended here, but it's taken some unexpected turns. Following her conviction, Maria fired her defense attorney, Christian Howie, citing incompetency, and sought an evidentiary hearing in 2021 to assess whether her previous attorney provided ineffective counsel, potentially warranting a new trial. During her trial, she had expressed a desire to have her children, Cyrus and Frankie Spencer, testify as witnesses, but her counsel did not allow their testimony. Additionally, she submitted multiple motions, one of which asserted that her brother, Anthony Sanuti, testified during their father's 2018 trial that Roco had confessed to acting alone. Maria insisted that her former lawyer never told her about her brother's confession and she was in the dark about it. She added, "I told my attorney I was not guilty of these things and I had evidence to prove it. I trusted in what he said and trusted in the legal system." She claimed that she was prohibited from informing the jury that she had injured her foot in a motorcycle accident just a few days before Frank's murder outside his Millville residence. Following the accident, she had to wear a cast and her mobility was severely restricted, so it would have prevented her from being able to commit the crime. Both of Maria and Frank's adult children staunchly support their mother, refusing to believe she is responsible for their father's death. In February 2018, they initiated a Facebook page seeking justice for Maria, viewing her as a victim of a biased town and channeling their grief and anger toward her. On the contrary, Frank's family perceives her as the Black Widow, a nightmare that culminated in the loss of Frank Spencer's life as portrayed by the media. Regardless of these differing opinions, it's the legal system that ultimately determines Maria's fate. In July 2023, her appeal for a new trial was rejected. Maria Spencer, now 58, is serving her sentence at the State Correctional Institution in Muncie, Pennsylvania. This case is particularly disturbing given that Frank was aware of his fate, and there were ample clues, yet ultimately no preventative measures succeeded. Discussions around domestic violence often focus on women as victims, but this case serves as a reminder that men can also fall prey to domestic violence. Despite the legal outcomes, it's disheartening to acknowledge that there are no winners in this case. Sadly, the ones who suffered the most were the children. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you buy her story that her father acted alone? Or do you think they were both in on it? Or do you have a different take on what might have happened? Share your opinions with us. We're eager to hear from you. Additionally, if there's a particular case you'd like us to explore, please suggest it in the comments. On June 15, 2023, just 3 days before Father's Day, a horrifying crime occurred in the peaceful village of New Richmond, Ohio. It left the community in disbelief and sorrow. The incident was so disturbing that the prosecuting attorney asked for the highest bond amount ever seen in the county. We're going to ask this court to issue a bond we've never asked for before. I'm going to ask for a bond of $20 million. And I hope I never need to request such a bond again. This incident left everyone involved with the question, what could be the motive behind this unthinkable act? On a Thursday, June 15, 2023, the weather in New Richmond was cloudy and it was around 75 degrees outside. Everything seemed normal, like a typical suburban American day. But this day turned out to be anything but ordinary. In the late afternoon, people noticed a teenage girl running down the road with a look of fear on her face. She was crying out for help, and her cries were filled with desperation. Her main goal was to reach the safety of a nearby firehouse where she could get help for something unimaginable that had happened to her. At exactly 4:18 p.m., a woman driving along Laura Lindale Road saw this teenage girl running with fear and heard her shouting, "My stepfather is killing everyone." Out of concern, she immediately stopped her car and talked to the girl to understand what was happening. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the woman quickly called 911 to get help for the girl and anyone else who might be in danger. There's a girl running down the street feeling like her stepfather is killing everyone in her family. And what did the female say to you? She says that her stepfather is killing everybody in her house. I did. I'm on the phone with them right now. Did you say how or what was happening? I asked her to get in the car with me and she said she couldn't leave her family. Deputies received a distressing message through their radio dispatch. They were informed that a man had started shooting and his own children were the targets of his violent actions. To understand the full story of what happened to this teenage girl and the terrifying events that unfolded, we need to start from the beginning and delve into the details of the situation. In the village of New Richmond, there is a house located along the 1900 block of Laura Lindale Road. This house was home to the Duran family, which consisted of Chad Christopher Duran, who was 32 years old, who lived there with his 34-year-old wife, Laura Duran. Together, they had 3 young sons named Clayton, 7 years old, Hunter, 4 years old, and Chase, 3 years old. Laura also had a teenage daughter named Alexis from a previous relationship who lived with him. The Duran children were full of lively energy and were very close to each other. They loved spending time with their cherished dogs, playing baseball, and supporting one another through all kinds of situations. However, their story took a darker turn on June 15, 2023 when Chad Dorman came home from work earlier than usual. He asked his wife Laura and their 3 sons to join him in the master bedroom for a nap. At that time, their daughter Alexis was in the family room watching television. Everything seemed normal and according to routine. After lying down with his wife and 3 sons, Chad got out of bed and went towards the gun safe next to his bed. Inside the safe was a Marlin Model HC-22 rifle. He took the rifle out of the safe and loaded it with a magazine containing bullets. Shockingly, he then shot 4-year-old Hunter twice. When the mother, Laura, heard the sound of the gunshots, she woke up and rushed to help her injured son. She immediately started providing aid to him and yelled at her other sons to run to safety. The situation was incredibly alarming and distressing for the family as Chad's actions were completely unexpected and violent. At that moment, the sister Alexis heard the gunshots and quickly went to the master bedroom. When she arrived, she saw Chad holding the rifle looking furious. Alexis was frightened, but she didn't let fear stop her, and despite the dangerous situation, she bravely attempted to save her siblings. She ran after Clayton to the back of the house, telling him to keep running to safety. But Chad followed them and continued shooting at the boy while he was running out into the backyard. The boy got hit by the bullets and fell down. Chad then came closer and shot him again from a very close distance. After Alexis ran back to the house, she grabbed her other brother Chase and ran away while holding him. As they got close to the road, Chad caught up with them and pointed the rifle at them, telling her to let go of her brother. Chad tried to fire at them, but the rifle didn't fire because it was empty with no ammunition left. After the 3rd son escaped, he ran to his mother who had gone outside to help Clayton, who was shot earlier. Meanwhile, Alexis started running toward the nearby Monroe Township Fire Department for help. She told a passerby who stopped to help her that her father was killing everyone as she fled. While there at the house, Chad approached the 3rd boy and Laura. He bit Laura while trying to take her son from her arms. In the struggle, Laura managed to grab the rifle, but Chad shot her through her thumb. Unfortunately, during the chaos, Laura dropped her son and Chad shot the son in the head. After this horrific act, Chad sat on the side stoop of the house watching as Laura desperately tried to save her children's lives. It seemed like he wanted to cause her even more pain. The police soon arrived at the crime scene after receiving multiple 911 calls from neighbors and people driving by. Where's he at? Yes, he's dead. Shooter's falling apart. Get him right now. Right here. You got him on the torch. We've asked. That's the last place we've been holding. You turn your hands now. Stand up, man. Stand up now. Stand up now. Right. Hold the right now. Walk towards us. Stand up with your hands up. His name is Chad Dorman. Chad Dorman. I know, but we can't first aid and he's not complying. Do you know he's a shooter? We gotta find cover first. We ain't no good if we ain't safe or so. Hey, no. We need to come from this side where we can see them. Don't take cover behind her. We see them. We're gonna approach from this side. We got cover. Right here. Thanks, Trevor. We gotta go. 29 and 63 hitch I got. And that's what I'm getting right now. Show us your hands now. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Now. What? 72. Look. Coming on 21. It's in the air. I'm completely sober. I'm 63. We're going wide. Get the EMS over here. Well, I beat George with a place, man. I beat George now. I'm sober. I'm not trying to fight you. 63. Get your butt inside. Gallon. Get your butt inside. We on primary. 29. We got 3. Now. How you doing? How you doing? 63. Gallon. 63. We're 21. Had BMS respond over here. What do I do? You're clear, they're being advised. Robert. 34 to start a mask. Do respond. 63. Do you want them to respond to the Laurel Lindale address? Where exactly do you need them? We're right in the front yard. You took my life for me. My life. What are you doing, man? Hey, pretty cocky. Oh man, can't roll over. I ain't gonna hurt you. I ain't gonna hurt nobody. You got anything on you? No, I ain't got nothing, man. Phone, that's it. Chad was behaving strangely after he committed the terrible act of killing his 3 sons. He kept saying things like, I won't do anything. I'm sober, which indicated that he was aware of what he'd done and what was happening around him. Surprisingly, he remained calm and showed no emotions despite the fact that he'd just taken the lives of his own children moments ago. When the police arrived, Chad didn't resist or try to escape. Instead, he cooperated and allowed them to arrest him without any trouble. He even informed the police about his dogs and showed concern for their safety, which was unexpected considering his impulsive and terrible act. Chad's behavior raised many questions about his state of mind and motives. Police quickly arrested Chad and took him to Claremont Police Station for questioning. After making sure the area was safe, more deputies carefully checked the surroundings. It was incredibly sad to find 3 young victims who had been shot. They were in critical condition and unresponsive. The boy's mother, Laura, was also found outside the house with a gunshot wound to her hand, which she had bravely endured trying to protect her children. Recognizing the urgent need for help, they quickly provided medically to the mother and rushed her to a nearby hospital for treatment. Sadly, by the time the police arrived, all 3 boys had already passed away. During the investigation that followed, detectives discovered that Chad had allegedly first killed 4-year-old Hunter by shooting him twice inside the house. After that, 7-year-old Clayton had tried to escape and ran into the field behind the house, but Chad chased him and shot him from behind. To be sure Clayton was dead, Chad fired 2 more rounds. Finally, Chad took 3-year-old Chase from his mother's arms and killed him as well. The entire community was shocked and saddened by this horrific incident. I'm shocked, to be honest with you. Why we moved here 6 years ago and the place is great. And then, New Richmond's coming up and you just hate to see anything like this anywhere. All of a sudden, I hear boom, boom. And at like 5 more, I'm like, that's 7 shots. That's shots, like there's no way. So I was freaking out like this before I got ready and everything and I don't know. Man, I just saw before that I saw 2 cars right here on the street, zoom as fast as humanly possible. It was like something's going down. When Chad was brought in for questioning, he made shocking statements to the law enforcement officers. He said things like, I did it, take me to jail, and I shouldn't have shot Laura and my sons. During an audio and video recorded interview, Chad revealed something even more disturbing. He'd been thinking about shooting his son since October 2022 for almost 8 months. He admitted that the thoughts of killing his own children were weighing so heavily on him that he hadn't slept for 3 or 4 days before the murders. It's hard to imagine what could drive someone to do such a terrible thing. Chad faced serious charges of 3 counts of aggravated murder after admitting to shooting his 3 sons with a rifle. After detectives interviewed him, he was then taken to the Claremont County Jail where he was held without bond. The next day, on June 16, 2023, he appeared in the Claremont County Municipal Court for a hearing to decide whether he'd be granted bond or not. The court took this case very seriously due to the severity of the charges against him. 1 week after the shooting, a grand jury in Claremont County added more charges to Chad's case. In total, there were 21 charges against him, including 9 counts of aggravated murder, 3 counts of kidnapping, and 4 counts of felonious assault. The indictment stated that Chad had planned and thought about the murders beforehand, admitting to having planned them for several months. Chad pleaded not guilty to all the charges against him. His lawyer decided not to ask for bond, possibly because they knew it would be difficult to get him released. The judge, Victor Haddad, saying at this point in time, bond's going to be set in the amount of $20 million cash or surety. The county prosecutor, Mark Takoevi, made it clear that he intended to fully prosecute Chad for the crimes he was accused of. First and foremost, I want to start out by expressing the deepest enemy I have with my family. This is unspeakable trash. I can't go into a whole lot of facts, alright? Because this is a death penalty case, and my goal is to have this man executed for slaughtering 2 boys. It is, let me make sure I figure out the way to prove this. It is an incomprehensible act of horror perpetrated on this family. So, again, that is my most important focus right now, is to ensure that they are protected and they are safe. My hope and worship prayer is that someday we will be able to find peace. But factually, I've said what I said on the record, and I'm gonna stick with that. Right? Why was it what's how complicated the death penalty is in Ohio right now, and how much extra work it adds to your office? Why was it important for you to seek this? I'll let the facts be for themselves. He slaughtered his 3 children in the most brutal fashion you can imagine, as I mentioned in court. The extra work, there's no extra work at all. This is what we do. This merits our attention and our devotion and our effort. Dalton on initial amount guilty. Plea? That has to be done. This means that Chad will remain in jail until his trial because he was not granted bail. Chad Dorman's next court appearance was scheduled for July 5, 2023 for a pretrial hearing, but no further details have been released by the police. After the tragic incident where Chad allegedly shot and killed his 3 sons, one big question remains unanswered. Why did he do it? As of now, the authorities have not been able to determine a clear motive for the killings. Chad's father, Keith Dorman, who's 51 years old, spoke with the New York Times and said that he and his wife Gloria are still struggling to understand how their son could have done such a terrible thing and murdered his own children. They said he just snapped. There's something going on in his life that he couldn't handle anymore. I can't talk to him. They aren't letting me talk to him, so I don't have any answers. He probably hid a lot of stuff from me. According to their neighbor, Richard Kincannon, Chad Dorman's behavior before the shooting was concerning. He described Chad as having a bad temper and constantly yelling at his wife and kids. Chad treated his wife poorly and seemed angry all the time. This indicates that from the beginning, he was not treating his family well and had a troubled relationship with them. Looking into Chad Dorman's background, investigators examined public records to find possible clues. They found that Chad had a minor criminal history, including a misdemeanor charge of criminal damage when he was 18, but that case was dismissed after restitution was paid. In 2010, he was charged with domestic violence for allegedly choking his father, but that case was also dismissed when the witness didn't show up in court. He also accumulated several traffic infractions and violations mostly related to speeding. The police had been to his house twice since 2020 apart from the recent incident, but no details about those visits were provided. On the county auditor's website, they found that Chad bought his house, which was a converted manufactured home on 3 acres of land, for $75,000, and the family was up to date with property tax payments. In an important study, Dr. Philip Restnik, a well-known psychiatrist, conducted thorough research in 31 cases of parents killing their children. He published his findings in the American Journal of Psychiatry in 1968. Dr. Restnik identified 5 main reasons for this type of crime, which he called filicide. One reason is altruistic filicide, where a parent believes that their child is suffering too much in a cruel world, and they see killing the child as a way to end their suffering. Another reason is fatal maltreatment, which happens when a child dies due to abuse or neglect, even if it wasn't the parent's intention to kill them. Spousal revenge killings involve harming a partner by targeting and harming their children. Unwanted child killings are where the parent may kill the child because they didn't want them or feel burdened by their presence. Acutely psychotic killings are cases of severe mental illness where a parent may harm their child due to hallucinations or delusions. It became evident that Chad Dorman fit into the category known as family annihilators, joining the unfortunate list of parents who commit such heinous acts, but the motive behind it remains unknown. Rachel Brown, Laura's sister, started a fundraiser on GoFundMe to help with the cost of the funerals for Laura's 3 children. In her heartfelt message, Rachel expresses the immense pain and sadness of losing her sister's amazing kids. She acknowledged that nothing could ever make the situation better or okay, but she asked for people's generosity to help ease the financial burden that came with this tragic loss. Rachel believed that no one should have to go through such a heartbreaking experience, and she appealed to the kindness and empathy of others to support her family during this difficult time. On June 26, 2023, A special event called a Celebration of Life was held to honor and remember the 3 boys who tragically lost their lives. The community members gathered at the First Baptist Church of Glen Estee and wore bright colors as requested by the family to symbolize positivity and hope. Even though it was a sad occasion, people cherished the memories they had with the boys and showed their determination to stand by the family during these tough times. To raise funds and show support, a memorial was organized at a baseball field and T-shirts were sold. The daughter, Alexis, also expressed her wish to participate in a sports tournament in memory of her brothers, showcasing the strength of the family and the love and support they received from the community. May the memory of Clayton, Hunter, and Chase live on. And may this case serve as a reminder to cherish and protect the bonds of family and community. On May 4, 2003, a stunning event sent shivers through the state of Kentucky. At the heart of this gripping moment was Katie Autry, an 18-year-old embarking on her freshman year at Western Kentucky University in Bowling Green. Tragically, she fell victim to a horrifying and unthinkable act. She was assaulted, subjected to abuse, and ultimately met a devastating fate as she was set on fire inside her dorm room. What do you believe led to this tragic event involving Katie Autry? And who do you think was the monster responsible for this heinous crime? Melissa K. Autry, affectionately known as Katie, entered this world on June 10, 1984 in Regina, Kentucky. Unfortunately, her upbringing was far from easy. In a family of 3, herself, her sister Lisa, and their mother Donnie Rose Autry, difficulties arose primarily from their mother's mental health challenges as she suffered from schizophrenia. When Katie was merely 10 years old, she and her sister were placed in foster care due to these issues. Eventually, she found a sense of stability living with older foster parents, Jim and Shirley Inman in Pellville. Despite these changes, Katie maintained a connection with her biological mother throughout her life. Katie excelled during her high school years, demonstrating academic prowess while also taking on the role of a cheerleader. Despite her petite stature and blonde hair, she made a significant impact. Upon graduating from Hancock County High School in February 2002, Katie made a deliberate choice to attend Western Kentucky University and continue her plan on becoming a dental hygienist. Katie commenced her freshman year at WKU in February, relishing the newfound freedom and experiences that college life offered. She struck up a close friendship that led to her becoming roommates with someone she connected with. Together, they frequented parties, indulged in drinking, and embraced the social scene on campus. During this time, Katie also began to explore her own sexuality, a journey that led to her being labeled with a hurtful nickname, Ho from the Second Flow, as jokingly mentioned by one of her friends named Logan. In her romantic life, Katie was involved in a more extended, intimate relationship with a person named Maurice. However, Maurice was already in a relationship with someone from another town and wasn't seeking a serious commitment with Katie. During her freshman year in college, Katie made a significant choice to emancipate herself from the Kentucky foster care system. This decision was driven by her desire for independence. However, while striving for autonomy, she faced a substantial consequence: losing the financial support she received for her college education as a foster child. With this sudden shift in her circumstances, Katie had to navigate a new reality where she no longer had her college expenses covered. To manage, she reduced her status to part-time enrollment and ventured into multiple off-campus jobs to make ends meet. Among these various occupations, she briefly worked as an exotic dancer in order to support herself financially. Throughout her life, Katie had garnered numerous accolades and honors in both school and college. From being recognized as Academic All-State to earning titles like Honor Roll Student of the Month and Most Improved Cheerleader 1998-1999, she had a track record of achievements. However, as she stood at the cusp of eagerly anticipated future endeavors, an unimaginable horror was lurking just around the corner, ready to disrupt her life in a devastating way. On the evening of Saturday, May 3, 2003, Katie and her roommate planned to attend the Pi Kappa Alpha frat party hosted on their campus. Prior to the party, they had been pre-gaming, causing Katie to become intoxicated before arriving. When they reached the party, Katie was already drunk. It was a known trait for Katie to become emotional and tearful when drunk, often requiring her roommate to look after her. Spotting Maurice at the party, Katie asked him to dance, but he declined. This rejection upset Katie, leading to a confrontation between her and Maurice. Her behavior turned frustrating and disruptive, prompting the host to request her departure as she was causing a disturbance. As per the fraternity pledge, they were inclined to drive people home. So one of the attendees volunteered to take Katie back home as she left the party. However, her roommate, who was enjoying herself, opted to stay and promised to check in on Katie later. Expressing gratitude to the driver for ensuring Katie's safe return, the roommate planned to spend the night elsewhere with a friend but became concerned about Katie's well-being. Around 2:30 a.m. on May 4, 2003, a short while after Katie had left the party, the roommate called to verify Katie's arrival home and ensure she was safe. Katie answered the phone and told her roommate she was lying in bed. She then told her roommate there was a guy in her room, and she was scared. Katie even told her roommate that she didn't know the guy that was in her room. Seeking reassurance, the roommate asked to speak with the individual in Katie's room. A male voice came on the line identifying himself as the person who had escorted Katie home. He explained that he ensured her safe arrival to a room due to her intoxicated state, reassuring the roommate not to be alarmed. Before ending the call, Katie's roommate sensed the presence of a second male voice in the room. Despite this, she wasn't overly worried and assured Katie that they'd catch up in the morning. But about a half an hour later, the fire alarm rang out at Hugh Poland Hall, a typical occurrence in a college dormitory, often triggered by someone mistakenly burning popcorn. Students, some groggy from sleep and others still under the influence of alcohol, began evacuating the building assuming it was just another false alarm. However, when firefighters emerged with a severely burned body, the gravity of the situation hit them. It became evident that something incredibly serious had occurred. The first responders swiftly entered the dorm room, pinpointing the origin of the fire. Upon entering, a firefighter noticed that the sprinkler system had already extinguished the flames, but something caught their eye, a shimmering object on the bed. It wasn't until closer inspection that they realized it was a person noticing a faint rise and fall of a chest. It was Katie Autry, severely beaten and burned, with a shirt covering her face and another piece of fabric wrapped around the sprinkler system. The scene revealed a harrowing truth. Katie herself was the source of the fire, a result of someone setting her ablaze while she was still alive. As they carefully carried her out of the building, she uttered to the firefighters, "Take me home." Katie suffered severe burns, particularly to her chest and genital area, and investigators found evidence of a hairspray used as an accelerant. Additionally, alcohol gel was discovered inside her, presumably in an attempt to erase potential evidence of an assault. Katie's critical condition required her transfer to Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville, Tennessee. Doctors revealed the severity of her burns, indicating that they likely destroyed a significant portion of her nerve endings, providing a tragic relief by potentially reducing her level of pain. Despite the diligent medical attention she received, Katie tragically succumbed to her injuries, passing away 3 days later on May 7, 2003. The Western Kentucky police initially focused on Katie's roommate's absence that night given their unusual companionship. Her roommate clarified she was with another friend and disclosed the unsettling phone call involving Katie and an unidentified male. This led authorities to investigate the designated driver who claimed to have brought Katie home. During the interview, he denied knowledge of what happened to Katie after dropping her off. They also questioned Katie's so-called boyfriend, Maurice, who had an alibi. However, their attention returned to the designated driver when new information surfaced revealing that Katie wasn't the sole passenger in the vehicle that night. There was indeed another person. When questioned further, the driver who had escorted Katie home that night admitted that Katie had a friend accompany her in the car. This individual turned out to be a 20-year-old named Stephen Souls. Stephen Souls, a resident from nearby Scottsville, wasn't a student at WKU. That night, he'd accompanied friends to the party, but became intoxicated and ended up passing out in the back of the car. During the ride back to Katie's dorm, Katie playfully teased Stephen about his condition, calling him sick boy. Upon arriving at Katie's dorm, she exited the car. At that point, Stephen informed his friend that he wanted to approach Katie and holler at her and got out of the car. That moment marked the driver's last sighting of Stephen Soules. When brought in for questioning, Stephen Soules was already known within his community as a dishonest individual prone to theft. He was a year or two older than Katie and had a reputation for idleness, not being enrolled in school or holding a job. Often achieved with underachievers in Scottsville, Kentucky, he had a track record of spending time with fellow cannabis users. While Stephen hadn't been involved in any significant legal issues, he was recognized among his peers as a deceitful person involved in dishonest practices, earning labels such as liar, cheat, and thief. Many in his social circle distrusted him, perceiving him as someone who took advantage of others. From Soules' statement, authorities gathered that he and a group of friends had also attended the fraternity party that evening. They had been drinking heavily and were significantly intoxicated by the time the party commenced. Soules claimed he felt unwell and opted to rest in the back of a friend's vehicle to recover. He mentioned that during the drive to Katie's dorm, he and she were engaging in playful behavior and making out. And at that point, that's all he initially disclosed regarding the events. When questioned, Soules denied going up to Katie's dorm room. However, he eventually confessed that after Katie left the vehicle, he followed her and managed to sneak through the dorm room door before it closed. He admitted to following Katie up to her room and acknowledged being intimate with her. As police continued their discussions with Soules, his narrative underwent multiple alterations. Ultimately, when confronted with accusations of causing harm to Katie, he insisted that he hadn't harmed her himself but claimed to know who had. This revelation drastically shifted the direction and focus of the entire investigation. According to Soules, while he was spending time with Katie in her room, his friend, a man named Lucas Goodram, contacted him inquiring about his location. Soules informed Goodram of his whereabouts and, subsequently, Goodram arrived at Katie's dorm room. Soules recounted that upon Goodram's arrival, Goodram expressed a desire to engage in intimate activities with Katie. However, when Katie refused, Soules claimed that Goodram, driven by anger, violently assaulted her. According to Soules, Katie attempted to defend herself, but due to Goodram's larger size, she couldn't escape his grip. Soules alleged that he witnessed the horrifying scene as Lucas Goodram proceeded to torture and set Katie on fire. Upon conducting a background check on Lucas Goodram, authorities discovered that he was 21 years old in the February and wasn't enrolled as a student at WKU or any other educational institution. His history revealed a pattern of instability, lacking steady employment or pursuing further education. Goodram had already experienced a failed marriage and was a father to a young son. Allegations from his ex-wife suggested that Goodram had been abusive toward her. Moreover, the day prior to Katie's attack, Goodram had been arrested on domestic violence charges related to his then-girlfriend. These details painted a troubling picture of Goodram, indicating a history of violent behavior and instability, portraying him as someone with a troubled past and concerning behavior. Goodram's family background revealed that his mother had married his stepfather, who happened to be an heir to the well-known Dollar General stores. With this familial connection to wealth, Goodram often received financial support despite his reluctance to work, frequently indulging in substance abuse. Eventually, he relocated to Scottsville with his mother and stepfather. Now, as far as the two suspects were concerned, Soules and Goodram shared a friendship, but also had frequent disputes, largely stemming from Goodram's perception of Soules as a freeloader and dishonest individual. There was an incident where Soules allegedly told Goodram's girlfriend that Goodram was cheating on her, resulting in an argument between the two. In the heat of the moment, Goodram resorted to using a racial slur directed at Soules, who was of mixed race. Despite these tensions, on the night of May 3rd, both agreed to spend time together and attended the party in the company of mutual friends. When questioned by the police, Goodram admitted to encountering Katie at the party, but denied ever visiting her dorm room. But evidence surfaced from her resident assistant at another dorm, placing Goodram in the lobby of that building around 2:30 a.m., coinciding with the time of the phone call between Katie and her roommate. However, despite these details, Goodram staunchly maintained that he had no knowledge of the assault and murder of Katie Autry. Furthermore, both his stepfather and mother asserted that he was at home before the fire alarms went off at 4 a.m., providing him with an alibi for the time of the incident. The police suspected that there was more to the story than what had been disclosed. They leaned towards accepting Stephen Soul's version of events from that night, highlighting Goodram's known history of violence in contrast to Soul's lack of such a history. According to the police, they found no substantial reason to distrust Stephen Soul's narrative. As a result, on May 12, 2003, both Souls and Goodram were apprehended and charged with first-degree capital murder. The gravity of the charges meant that they were both facing the possibility of the death penalty. While awaiting trial, forensic analysis revealed DNA evidence retrieved from inside Katie's body. Despite attempts to erase evidence through alcohol gel use and burning, male bodily fluid was discovered and it matched Stephen Soul's DNA. However, there is no evidence found in the room that could be attributed to Lucas Goodram. Upon questioning, Soul admitted to assaulting Katie, but claimed that he did so only after threats from Goodram, fearing for his own life if he refused. Despite Soul's admission, the lack of substantial evidence against Lucas Goodram left authorities uncertain about securing a conviction against him. Given the dilemma surrounding the case and the lack of evidence against Goodram, authorities opted to offer Stephen Soul a deal. In the agreement, Stephen Soul consented to plead guilty to a range of charges encompassing murder, assault, sodomy, arson, robbery, complicity to commit robbery, and complicity to commit assault. As a result of this plea deal, the death penalty was removed as a potential punishment for Stephen Soul. In return for this plea, Soul was obligated to testify against Lucas Goodram during Goodram's imminent capital murder trial. During his testimony, Stephen Soul altered his account once more. He maintained that Goodram was the individual responsible for the initial attack, beating, and assault on Katie. However, Soul now asserted that after being coerced by Goodram to commit assault, he was the one who sprayed the hairspray and set Katie on fire. He claimed that these actions were carried out under Goodram's instructions and threats. This new testimony contradicted his previous statement where he'd implicated Goodram as the one who burned Katie alive. According to the evidence, Stephen Soul was the sole individual whose DNA was discovered at the crime scene. He ultimately confessed to both and setting Katie on fire, leading to her tragic death. Conversely, Lucas Goodram had an alibi for that night and vehemently denied any involvement. No conclusive evidence directly linked Goodram to the crime. The only connection was Soul's testimony and a statement from a jailhouse informant alleging Goodram's confession while awaiting trial. However, this evidence was deemed insufficient by the jury. Consequently, Lucas Goodram was acquitted of all charges and subsequently released in February 2005. Prosecutor Chris Coron accused Goodram's parents of dishonesty in their attempts to shield them from legal repercussions. Despite these accusations, the evidence fell short in keeping Goodram incarcerated. Goodram, having spent the past 2 years in jail, expressed indifference towards Soul, stating, "I don't have feelings either way." He expressed his contentment at being released and regaining freedom, rejoicing and reuniting with his family. Goodram mentioned plans to relocate to Texas to work on his family's ranch. Katie's family experienced profound devastation, believing that Lucas Goodram escaped justice for the rape and murder of their loved one. Stephen Soul, however, received a sentence of life imprisonment with no chance of parole. Presently, he remains in the Kentucky Department of Corrections, serving a sentence for his involvement in the tragic events surrounding Katie's death. This case has already captured significant attention within the community. The public's involvement and their perception of the events became a major news story at that time, drawing widespread interest and discussion. The controversy surrounding Goodram, who was white and affluent, contrasted with Soul, who was of mixed race and less financially privileged, escalated the case to another level of intensity. Many individuals held the belief that Goodram's freedom was facilitated by his wealth, allowing him access to top-tier legal representation, a privilege not afforded to Soul. This disparity in resources fueled widespread perceptions of unequal treatment within the legal system. The Internet also became a platform for discussions regarding the racial dynamics of the case. Despite Soul not being viewed as innocent, a prevailing opinion emerged that his mixed race identity played a central role in the case's focus. Moreover, the subsequent years saw Lucas Goodram facing charges of domestic violence and making terroristic threats against his ex-wife. After relocating to Texas, he withdrew from the public eye and his current whereabouts remains unknown. Despite widespread belief in Goodram's guilt, certain unanswered questions continue to puzzle investigators and the public. The dorm rooms required resident keycards for access. While Stephen Soules admitted to following Katie just before the door closed behind her, the mystery remained regarding how Goodram could have gained entry into the building later. Additionally, the absence of Goodram's DNA on Katie's person while Soules' DNA was found raised further questions. However, the credibility of Goodram's parents' alibi clashed with the account from another individual in a separate dorm who claimed that Goodram was present there at 2:30 a.m. These lingering uncertainties contributed to the ongoing intrigue surrounding the case. So even though Goodram might have been involved or might have been the main criminal mind behind this heinous act, this time, the authorities failed to provide the evidence needed. And that's something that cannot be changed. Either Goodram was a brilliant criminal or he wasn't involved at all. So what do you think actually transpired inside the dorm room on that fateful night? Was Goodram the main mastermind or was Soules the sole monster of this story?